We are going to, whoa, I hear an echo, which is kind of cool. Kind of annoying. There we go. All right. It is my honor to call to order the April 9th, 2026 Mountlake Terrace City Council Work Session agenda. That's our agenda meeting, I should say. Let's do with attendance roll call, please, clerk.
Mayor Woodard.
Present.
Councilmember Murray.
Present.
Councilmember Doyle.
Present.
Councilmember Sonmore.
Here.
Councilmember Matsumoto Wright.
Here.
Councilmember Page asked to be excused. And Mayor Pro Tem Wall asked to be excused.
Do we have a motion to excuse Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Page?
I move that we excuse Councilmember Page and Mayor Pro Tem Wall.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second. Oh,
All righty. Have our second. Take it to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. They are excused for the evening. We'll move to general public comment next, which is, do we have any general public comment?
We do have one public comment, but I will read the protocol first. The city welcomes general public comments at the beginning of council work sessions and meetings and comments on particular agenda items at the time they are discussed. Public comments are for the official record. Council does not respond to comments or questions during this time. Address the council as a whole, and comments shall pertain to topics, not individual council members, staff, or audience members. Limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes. The clerk will terminate comments beyond this allotted time or if there is a violation of these guidelines. Written comments received will be added to the official record but will not be read aloud. John Martin, you'll have 5 minutes at the podium.
Sound check. It's nice to be here in these close kind of proximities. It's almost like a fraternity or a sorority meeting. And I'm glad to see some of you local media people here today again. And I apologize, you've heard this speech before. A small step for a man or woman and a giant leap for a city council. Big things, like going to the moon or changing the public-private structure, start with small steps. The money for the new professional baseball stadium was and is from the youth activity account. Monday night, Mayor Rosen of Edmonds was asked, "Do you support taking money from local parks and using it to build a professional baseball stadium instead?" Mayor Rosen answered, "Hell no." So I asked Mayor Rosen, "Will you introduce the youth activity account resolution tonight?" And I was sure his answer would be the same. Hell no. Stop using kids and parks money to build a new professional baseball stadium in downtown Everett. A small step for a man or a woman, but a giant leap for a city council. Mountlake Terrace City Council, take a giant leap. Or is your answer the same as the mayor? Hell no. A small step for a man or a woman, but a giant leap for a city council. Mountlake Terrace City Council, take a giant leap. Or is your answer the same as the mayor? Hell no. A small step for a man or woman, but a giant leap for a city council. Mountlake Terrace City Council, take a giant leap. Or is your answer the same as the mayor? Hell no. A small step for a man or a woman, but a giant leap for a city council. Mountlake Terrace City Council, take a giant leap. Or is your answer to them the same as the mayor? Hell no.
Are you asking council to respond?
A small step for a man or a woman, but a giant leap for a city council. Mountlake Terrace City Council, take a giant leap. Or is your answer the same as the mayor? Hell no.
That concludes public comment.
Thank you, City Clerk. Just as a reminder for folks watching at home or in the audience, we remind you we do not respond, we receive. That said, I will make a response and just say this is National Poetry Month, and that might be one of the best poems I've heard in a while. Going to number 4, Proclamation for Local News Day. We're going to switch it up and have your mayor read this one because he's selfish. What an absolute honor to have our local news be celebrated today. This is actually one of my favorite days. We have our police report. We're going to have a HASCO conversation. I see that we have Parks and Rec in the room as well, but local news means the most to me personally. I don't say this lightly when I say I'm pretty sure I stand here because of local news. I was a newspaper boy as my very first job. And I was the end of a long line of newspaper boys, and I had to say it was boys. It must have been really rough being a girl in the 80s, reflecting back on it. But nonetheless, I got to watch the technology shift. And then I also saw the loss of newspaper carriers, boys and girls, which I think was really the downfall of a lot in communities, because really you stop showing responsibility. I absolutely remember not being able to sleep in on Sunday, and you better have that paper on somebody's doorstep by 7 a.m. where they said, or that was some real responsibility trickling back to you at a very young age. But more importantly, it also exposed me to the real world. I sadly remember folding about 100,000 pages, it felt like, of the first in San Diego mass shooting, which is a turn you didn't see coming, right? And really to have to sit there and keep folding these papers and recognize, I love McDonald's. I'm a kid. I would have loved to have been at McDonald's, and look what happened. Really aged you, but in a way that you still had community around you to help you through that. Again, I think that loss of the newspaper, the physical aspect of it, just leave it at that. I switched gears a little bit. So let's go back to the local news here and read the proclamation. But really, I just wanted to say thank you for generations of folks who I know would look back and say, hey, I am absolutely where I'm standing because I knew how responsibility felt at an early age, and more importantly, power, because you knew you had information that people wanted, which is a whole other story about Pacific Northwest passive aggressive. City of Mountain, nobody got that one right. You could throw it in the bush if you wanted to, if you didn't like the people. So that said, City of Mountlake Terrace Proclamation, Local News Day. Really, nobody laughed at that. I got some people grinning. You think about that. Local News Day. Whereas strong communities depend on strong local news and information to keep residents informed, connected, and prepared. And whereas local news organizations provide verified independent reporting that helps residents make everyday decisions about schools, public safety, healthcare, small businesses, elections, and community events. And whereas access to trusted local news and information strengthens civic participation, supports transparency and accountability in government, and fosters a culture of informed citizenship. And whereas local journalists serve as essential members of our community, attending public meetings, covering emergencies, highlighting community achievements, and telling the stories that reflect who we are. And whereas Local News Day is a national day of action, connecting people with local, independent, and trusted news sources in their own communities and encouraging residents to learn about, engage with, and support the newsroom that serves them. And whereas participation in Local News Day provides an opportunity for residents, institutions, and local governments to celebrate the value of local news and information through community events, public recognitions, and visible acts of support. Now, therefore, I, Steve Woodard, Mayor of the City of Mountlake Terrace, on behalf of the City Council, hereby present this proclamation to local journalists to encourage all residents to recognize the importance of trusted local news and information and to engage with the local news organizations that serve our community. Proclaimed by this City Council on April 9th, 2026. It is my honor to bring forth our My Neighborhood Network News team, both our English side and, if they're open to it, our Spanish-speaking side as well, or anyone else who would like to join you to receive our proclamation. It is our honor to offer it to you. This is where we applaud, everybody. We are very blessed to have you all in our community, and I know you serve many communities, but what an honor for us to be able to join the other communities in honoring all of you. So thank you all for being here. Yes. And if you'd like to say some words, and we'll do some photos. So.
See, you're very good at that. Maybe we can both do that. Thank you so much. It really is an honor to have this presented today. And I wanted to clarify that those folks are Se Habla News, and they do their own broadcast, but we partner with them, and they supply video for us every day that is translated into English, which is wonderful. But we really appreciate the recognition. It is an honor, I'll speak for our organization, to be the only news organization that covers Mountlake Terrace regularly. We have taken great pride in that over the years, and I also want to thank all of you, especially the elected officials, for your patience with us. We know we don't always get it 100% right, but we really value the fact that you are there to help us and to correct us when we make a mistake, and also to give us praise when praise is due. So thank you for your support, and I would like Jaime and Deanna, or either one, to say a word.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, we are Se Habla News. We are a local and regional newscast in Spanish, and in fact, we are the only daily newscast left, since the only one before Univision Seattle closed doors 2 years ago. So we're trying to fulfill a very huge gap left when that was gone. And we care very much about our community. It's important that the Spanish-speaking community in the area, in the region, gets real news, serious news, and news that come from also their own community, and we're part of this community. Thank you. Appreciate the recognition.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, can we have the council come do a group photo? If you're up for it, do a group photo. Or you want to be, yeah. We can use this backdrop here.
Okay.
Yeah, come on. I love it.
Thank you very much. Nice meeting you. And we are.
Oh, sorry. One, sorry.
right, we have another proclamation that I almost stole to read for myself, but I will not, and that is our Arbor Day proclamation by Councilmember Murray.
All right, well, I appreciate Mayor Woodard sharing the love and letting me have the opportunity to read our Arbor Day proclamation. I think I, along with many of our residents, have a particular love for trees, and so I appreciate that this is something that we honor and celebrate every year, and excited to invite some folks up to talk a little bit more about it here in a moment, but I'll read the proclamation first. So whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife, and whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products, and whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community, and whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal, and whereas April 8th is Arbor Day in the state of Washington, and April 24th is the nationally recognized Arbor Day, now therefore, Mayor Steve Woodard, on behalf of the Mountlake Terrace City Council, does hereby proclaim April 24th, 2026 as Arbor Day. I would love to invite up our Arbor Day receivers. Just Audrey, not Selena too. I was told that Selena was coming up, but I'm happy to invite whoever would like to come up and speak and receive the proclamation. Thank you. We appreciate all your work and being here.
Let me pull up what Thank you. I really am honored to accept this proclamation on behalf of the Recreation and Parks Advisory Commission, which also serves as our city's tree board. This has been a landmark year for our tree canopy. Our city officially adopted the Urban Forest Management Plan. Our residents received expert advice from an arborist at the last tree lighting. City staff deepened their expertise through tree maintenance and pruning training with the Department of Natural Resources. And we've seen many trees planted throughout our parks in the last year. And it was exactly 1 year ago today that we held our first heritage tree dedication. We're also thrilled, or I'm thrilled, that the stormwater manager role evolved into the environmental programs manager role. And by doing this, this provides the dedicated oversight our urban forest management plan deserves. I'm really proud that our community has remained a Tree City USA for 7 years now. I'm grateful to our city staff for their commitment to our urban forest and all of the volunteers that have planted and protected our trees. And so on that note, I have to give a huge shout out to my fellow Ivy Leaguers for their hands-on work protecting our parks from invasive English ivy. And anyone who wants to join us once a month, Saturday, 9 a.m., we go to different parks removing ivy and other invasive plants that harm our trees. I look forward to seeing everyone at Arbor Day in action on April 25th at Ballinger Park.
Oh, no, I have the mic. Would you like to take pictures? Sure.
Come on. She says yes.
Trees. Outstanding.
One more?
One more, sorry.
All right, thank you kindly. As a former Rexon Park, RPAC member, it's always wonderful to hear us. We are going to keep moving here. Now we're going to go to a presentation with the Housing Authority of Snohomish County. It seems like led by our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. We're just going to introduce Chris Collier here. I'm sure he's a familiar face to many of us, to talk about HASCO and covering the history of public housing authorities, among other things. And I'll turn it over to Chris as soon as we get his presentation up on the screen.
Is it working? Okay. Well, thank you all so much for the invitation and opportunity to speak to you tonight. Let me try to talk into the microphone so we can hear. My name is Chris Collier. I'm the Government Relations Director for the Housing Authority of Snohomish County, and here to give you an introduction to what that is exactly. So what I'll cover today is the history of public housing authorities, or PHAs, in Washington State, and what is a housing authority, what do they do, and then what HASCO looks like and means in Mountlake Terrace, and our recent activities, things that you might want to know, and then, of course, the big picture in housing. This isn't you might know me as being infamous for data. This is not that. This is much more focused on what a housing authority is and partnerships between the housing authority and the city of Mountlake Terrace. I'm not covering today, really getting into the deep nitty-gritty details of the voucher program. You might have heard that the Housing Choice Voucher Program's in shortfall basically across the country. I'm not getting into any of those things or property development specifics like where does the money come from? Why is it here? Why is it not there? Those are all things that we can talk about in future meetings. This is definitely not a one-off presentation or discussion on housing. And certainly not covering regional demographic trends and data, again, as I'm infamous for. This is our building, the front door of HASCO on 4th and 128th in South Everett. So what a Washington State Housing Authority is first authorized by 42 USC 1437C, the United States Housing Act of 1937. So that is the true root of housing authorities across the entire country, from the New York City Housing Authority all the way to HASCO. That gave states the latitude to create their own codes, and Washington State took that authority in 1939 with RCW 3582, which is where you can find all the things that make a housing authority what it is in Washington State. A housing authority in Washington State can do things differently or is authorized to do or not do different things than, say, Minnesota. So that's an important distinction, or New York City or any other housing authority of the state. Snohomish County then took the opportunity, so the RCW gives counties and cities to the authority to create their own housing authority, and Snohomish County took that opportunity in 1971 to, legally speaking, to utilize or activate their housing authority, that authority given to them. The only other housing authority in Snohomish County is operating in Everett. And so they operate in Everett and with a 5-mile buffer outside of the city limits. So that is your housing authority picture in Snohomish County. Housing authority, and so back to state housing authorities, they all can issue bonds, loans and debt, receive grants, and operate housing property with 50% of the units below 80% of area median income or below the low income, and half of them can be above that. And I can talk more about that if you'd like to in the future. We have the authority to, but we do not use power of eminent domain. We can also own or operate ownership property. But right now the housing authority is exclusively focused on its internal operations on rental properties. So we are also supporting, as I'll cover in a couple slides, I'm getting ahead of myself, ownership opportunities across the county. Just that's not something that we do completely internally. So supporting other partners, community partners in that work. Like I mentioned, community partnership, we can also experiment, study, and do much more. So RCW 3582.070 that I have committed to memory is the fun and exciting list of all the things the Housing Authority really can do. That's where experimentation, community partnership, and all the rest comes from. There's a separate RCW about housing cooperation law, and that supports these supports municipal partnership with housing authorities, makes it really easy, lowers the bar that's already fairly low between intergovernmental cooperation between housing authorities and cities on the issue of housing and housing affordability. So the state long ago was looking at this issue and said, yeah, we need to have collaboration there. So that's something that HASCO really leans into, as I'll share in a couple slides. What we cannot do is tax. Housing authority revenue comes exclusively from their operations. It does not come from tax revenue. There is no guaranteed local, state, or federal source of money that keeps the lights on at the housing authority, period. Unless it is specifically granted on a one-off basis. There's nothing in statute and what I've covered so far that guarantees operating revenue for the housing authorities to do anything. So there's that, which leads us to really focus typically more nationwide. That leads housing authorities to focus on self-generated revenue through our properties, as I'll cover in a minute, or look at tax-funded programs, right? Housing choice vouchers, public housing funded through federal dollars, low-income housing tax credits, which is another way of having the federal government fund housing authorities. So those are really the two options, is you can generate your own revenue, and we go back to operating properties that are at 80% of median or somewhat above 80% of median to generate revenues locally, or to hitch your wagon to public subsidy dollars, which are hard to come by these days. So HASCO in community. In Snohomish County, HASCO has 4,300 vouchers of different types and focus areas. These are your general vouchers for a household of about 50 to 60% of the area median income. We have lots of different flavors of vouchers. There's a lot that can go into this, and I am not the expert, but serving veterans, seniors, supporting family reunification after a CPS action, foster youth, and disabled individuals and households, and more. We have at least 10, probably more, separate voucher programs outside of what is the typical housing choice voucher or Section 8. And to be clear, I said I wouldn't get into the real nitty-gritty details, but as you think about a voucher, what that is a tenant-based voucher. A tenant applies or goes to the housing authority and says, I would like a voucher, I qualify. Wait. The wait, as I'll cover in just a couple clicks, is very long. Receives a voucher and then can use that voucher anywhere in Snohomish County. So when someone says Section 8, it means that a voucher has been given to a household for use within Snohomish County, including the city of Everett through an MOU with the Everett Housing Authority, so that a client household can go anywhere in the county. There are other program particulars that I won't get into for time, but a voucher, I've heard before, we have Section 8 units. That's not accurate, right? A Section 8 voucher is assigned to a household. They can move anywhere. It's a tenant-based voucher, in contrast to a project-based voucher where it's a voucher given to a specific unit at a specific property, regardless of who lives there. So that's where that confusion might show up, but I'm getting into the weeds. I'm sorry. In Mountlake Terrace, as of March 25th, when I made this presentation, there were 164 vouchers, tenant-based vouchers in use. Let's see. So that's just a quick snapshot of what HASCO's clients look like in Mountlake Terrace. HASCO has an interlocal agreement with the city of Mountlake Terrace, making HASCO your housing authority. Okay. Sure, go ahead.
Question. I had to do the math. That's less than 4% of the vouchers available, if I read correctly?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Just want to make sure. It's 4,300, and in our city, 164 have been able to use it to their.
It's based in part, and this is where I run the risk, so I'm being careful in my language, I run the risk of saying the wrong thing, but basically, once received, the voucher holder, the voucher household has to go find an apartment that meets what's called fair market rent. Meets or is below fair market rent, which is 40% of the average rental market. And so that in higher cost areas, it is harder to use a voucher in that case because you don't want to be I would assume the origin of that goal or that requirement is don't go live in a luxury apartment on federal or on public dollars.
Gotcha.
Right. So,
Okay, thank you.
that's where we would love to come back and talk more in the future. HASCO has 2,768 physical units across Snohomish County. We serve all income levels, locations, different population and priority and program types. Some are old public housing that we converted into something else. We have USDA farm worker housing, particularly up in the north part of the county. So there's a lot to this. There's a whole separate presentation of what HASCO's physical unit portfolio looks like, and again, that we'd love to share. In Mountlake Terrace, this looks like 91 units out of a total income restricted unit profile of 210 units in the city of Mountlake Terrace. This is courtesy in large part thanks to the Puget Sound Regional Council, who do a lot of hard work keeping track of all of the units that touch state and local reporting systems. And so great thanks to them for keeping this data up to date. But we are 91 of the approximately 210 income restricted units in Mountlake Terrace. Let's see. So that was boring. Let's talk new and exciting. New and exciting things that HASCO is doing. We are looking to break ground on the 200th Street apartments, name pending in 2026. That should be 124 units total of half senior, half family oriented units. That is occupying the site of the old Timber Glen and Pinewood apartments that HASCO owned and operated for many years prior, but due to the significant age of those properties, were demolished last year, the year before, and will be reborn as the 200th Street name pending apartments. We have Leonard Crossing, named after our former executive director, Dwayne Leonard in Marysville, also hoping to break ground in June. Don't quote that, Teresa. She's not in the audience. In later this year, another 124 unit property that architectural drawing on the middle right is the current plan. And we are also working with Habitat for Humanity on the Vaughan Village project. It's near the QFC in Linwood, Edmonds, with 8 cottage-style housing units for seniors. That's the community partnership I mentioned, supporting ownership opportunities. So there's that as well. We also recently purchased the Allegro Apartments that opened. It was a 2-phase project that opened over the last 5 years. On 164th and Ash Way, that's 240 units of workforce-oriented housing, so slightly higher rents. It's very close to light rail, planned light rail at the Ash Way Park and Ride, or on the other side of the road, a decision pending. So that's about 488 units that we hope to bring into our portfolio or bring online in the next year and a half. So that's pretty exciting. So it's not all good news, though. There are challenges and needs. This is as close as I get to talking data, which you can see in the background is my pie chart of doom and the various other data. In summary, there is increasing difficulty in development across all sectors, including HASCO. It's just getting harder to build in Snohomish County, in the Puget Sound region, across the entire country. The data supports this statement. The sources are multiple. We can look large, we can look small, whether it's financing and subsidy, it's national interest and lending rates, the cost to build, land, lumber, and materials. All 3 of those and more are increasing in price, making it harder to build. Certainly when you want to keep the price down at an affordable level, that makes it tough. And certainly operation is also a critical issue. Operation is not just staff, it's also renovation of the properties, replacing siding, roofs, reserves, operating reserves, things like that. That's math that you've got to make math before you can get to groundbreaking. There is growing development complexity. Everything that we add that a housing unit has to do and be for people, for community, makes it harder to build, makes it more expensive to build. I'm putting that very succinctly, very briefly, but there's a lot to the complexity that we've added to construction, in particular in Washington State, let's be honest, in the last 10, 15, 20 years. So it's probably for good reasons, but it does come with a cost. We have to acknowledge that. Private market production, no surprise, is slowing down. I have the data to show it, but I'm not showing it tonight. That makes me worried about the risk of rents increasing again. In snapshot data for March, I'm seeing rents tick up just a little bit. That might be the summer, the weather getting nicer, but that's something that I'm watching is apartment production demonstrably has slowed down in the last 2-3 years. Senior rental housing is the critical issue. It was already bad. It's considerably worse. That chart in the background, the bar chart, is showing the number of cost-burdened senior renters that we have in Snohomish County. If you are a renter and if you are a senior and you rent, there's a 70% chance that you're cost-burdened. That's the one data point that I'll really share with you is 70% of all renting seniors in Snohomish County are cost-burdened, paying more than 30% of their income to rent every month. Now, there's not that many of them. There's about 8,000 compared to 16,000, 20,000 people renting households in middle-aged age brackets. But still, as a percentage of that age group, seniors have it the worst off, and it's getting worse. And that's a story that repeats itself across Washington state. So that's something that we're prioritizing, that we're really focused on is senior housing, what to do about that in the here and now. Our senior disabled wait list is 7, strike that 9, it's 7 to 10 years now to get on a senior, receive assistance if you're senior or disabled. The general wait list, as I mentioned, is closed. It's extraordinarily long to the point of closed until 2027 to 2028 when only about 200 to 300 households will be let on to the wait list, not served immediately. Subsidy sources are basically tapped out. I mentioned project basing vouchers where you take a voucher, assign it to a unit. HASCO and the Everett Housing Authority, I think, are limited to 20% of their total voucher allocation can be project based, and we're at that maximum limit. So that was how deep subsidy housing got done in years past, and we're out. The last project-based vouchers we had to give were to this Housing Hope project on, I'm going to misquote it, their Scriber property, is that right? Yeah, Scriber, 52 project-based vouchers at that property, and that's all we have. That's it. And no other replacement really exists, locally or in Washington state. Certainly federal policy is leading to funding uncertainty. Public-private partnerships really is the way of the world. And that's running into deep mud, and certainly federal changes are, again, leading to uncertainty that, you know, I refer back to the first slide when I talked about what housing authorities, the two ways of operating, either tying yourself to public funds or trying to generate revenue locally. And we're glad that we're more in the local revenue generation mindset at HASCO because the feds are sending out a lot of mixed signals. HASCO and Mountlake Terrace, our strategic plan that we just recently adopted was passed by our board 2 months ago, emphasizes financial stability for the organization, preservation of existing units and affordability, expanding opportunities for our clients and for our operations, our organizational strength, and following best practices both in the client service side and also technology, utilization of new and emerging technologies to do our job better and for our community better. What that really means in numbers is focusing on 50 to 80% area median income households, recapitalization of our portfolio, which is aging. We have dozens of properties across the county. A lot of them were built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, bringing them back up to standard. And then increasing our portfolio, like with the purchase of the Allegro apartments, and then focusing on community partnership, part of why I'm here tonight. Our goals align with the city goals and in your comprehensive plan and housing element. Particularly, we're here to participate and help. Housing goal 2.3, which I will admit I read in the back before I got up to speak, emphasizes, to refresh my memory, emphasizes community partnership. The city's goal is to emphasize community partnership with other municipalities and other organizations, including housing authorities. So we're here to participate in whatever way that shakes out. We can lend our expertise in code review, community outreach, hey, we want to change this thing. What's that going to do to affordability? How do we generate more affordability, or how do we support that? We have more than just units and vouchers to bring to the table. We have over 110 staff working on various issues, various facets of the affordability challenge. So also, HASCO supports the Alliance for Housing Affordability, of which Mountlake Terrace is a member. And let's see, top of mind for me is supporting House Bill 1406 funds being used effectively locally, either individually by cities or in partnership in pooled funding. We're also looking at, and this is something probably for a couple months from now, supporting cottage housing development, pre-approved plans oriented towards seniors and first-time homeownership opportunities, both of which are lacking in our communities, and much more. So please help us in our work. Join us in state and federal outreach. Your voice really does matter. I'm sure you all know this as elected officials. And also, I want to end on appreciation for Housing Policy 1.5, which emphasizes the direction the city to pursue options to be flexible, adjust zoning and development codes, and what that really means to me is help bring down cost, right? Help to reduce complexity and make it easier to build units that we can rent affordably to households and community. In conclusion, last, HASCO is ready to complement staff and the comprehensive plan. We're ready to work with you. We're excited to work with you. Just give us a call. We're not on your org chart, but we're here. This is something that I mentioned this as trite as it may seem. I have found that a lot of cities, no offense, Jeff, but a lot of staff, not you, say, well, you're not on the org chart, so you don't count, or I'm going to forget reaching out to you, or that HASCO being as large as it is with 110 staff and so on and so forth, they don't need to be here. They don't want to say anything. We do want to be there and say things, and participate, support you, support your knowledge in whatever form that takes. Our landscape is shifting in many, many ways. HASCO is working hard to keep up with the times. I mentioned funding uncertainty, instability, so on and so forth. We're technology, on and on and on. We're working hard to keep up with the times, and again, to support you. We appreciate the city's flexibility and its support for housing we and again, we look forward to working with you. Am I repeating myself? Let's see, HASCO is working to support a healthy overall ecosystem, so we are focused operationally on rental housing 50 to 80% area median. We are cognizant of upstream and downstream challenges. We've been working hard with our community partners in continuum of care funding, which is really your 0 to 30%, 0 to 50% AMI housing, working hard to help them, help organize, help develop a shared voice. And upstream, we're looking at ownership opportunities and recognizing if there's no place to buy to own, people will then end up renting, and that increases pressure on rental markets. And so we're trying to take a holistic vision. And so again, as we talk about partnership with Mountlake Terrace, we're here to help, here to participate and join you. I are more happy to come back and talk about specifics, whether it's vouchers and finance, development, trends, you name it, we'll be happy to be here. Just give us a call. And thank you very much. I'll stick around for any questions until you kick me out.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, comments, or feedback? Councilmember Matsumoto Wright.
Just want to first say that the person that started HASCO is a Mountlake Terrace resident, Leo Giese.
I did not know that.
So Mountlake Terrace resident started HASCO, Mountlake Terrace resident started community transit. So I don't think you covered this on here, but do we know how much it costs to build one affordable unit?
At the 200th Street, it's always variable, but at the 200th Street project, we're looking at about $500,000 to $550,000 a unit. There's lots of reasons for that, and I don't want to run the risk of ragging on Linwood, but it's everything from local to cost of materials to everything else. It can be really tough.
So if HASCO were to build it for $550,000 a unit and they had to break even, what would the rent be?
About $1,300 to $1,500 a month before we have to worry about interest repayment or anything. If all the money was lended to us with 0% interest, we'd have to pay or charge about $1,500 a month, minimum.
So that's where the problem with affordable housing comes in.
Correct.
Even that's the base cost. And so if you're going to build anything, it's and people can't afford that, then we have to look at vouchers. And now we have a limited amount of vouchers and probably less coming in with the federal government the way it is. Because before all of this, I was thinking, well, we just have to double the vouchers because HASCO is one of the few places, housing authorities that will actually use up the vouchers. Amazingly enough, other housing authorities around the country have extras at any time.
Right. When I made this slide on March 25th, our utilization rate, our leased up rate was quite high. It was at or above 90%. And our TPA director will probably kick me for misquoting that, but we were quite high. We've been a high-performing housing authority by HUD's definition for years and years. So
Are we still doing 100% of the VASH vouchers,
I believe so.
which is the homeless vets?
Right. So it's, Kyoko's point, Councilmember Matsumoto Wright's point is apt, that it's very hard to create units that you can rent for below $1,500 a month or so without something to fill that gap. If you want to rent it for $800, the question then becomes, where does that gap come from? Where does it, and the answer is it doesn't exist right now. And that is our problem to solve. So right now, I hope I'm not getting ahead of my skis, getting kicked by somebody else at HASCO. Having a strong, focusing on 50 to 80% AMI housing does give us the opportunity to have an operating reserve, give us an opportunity to try and problem solve that problem in new and creative ways. But that's something that we have to do now first before we can think about that from a financial strength perspective. So.
All right, Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chris. Nice to see you. I always appreciate and learn things when you come, so appreciate your time. And I have a million questions I wrote down, but recognize we have a packed agenda, so I will maybe try to keep some of those and ask you them offline at some point. But I think maybe, well, one question that I would love to ask that I think is pertinent to some of the conversation. So, I mean, I think the stats you were just talking about, right, in terms of like, focusing on, 50 to 80%, which worries me a little in terms of like, especially that 30 to 50%, like who's looking out for those folk? I mean, maybe that is a question, then I have a follow-up question to that.
There's some really hard truths in that question. In the answer to that question, there are right now, by my estimation, 96,000 households in Snohomish County that would qualify as very low income, below 50% of very median income. In total, we can serve about 25% of them at any given time, leaving, from memory, 77,000 very low-income households to figure it out every night. That's the hard math. And so who's looking out for them? We all are as best we can. But the answer, I mean, there's no good answer to that question, really.
Yeah, no. I appreciate the candor, and I mean, I will say that like that's hard, and I will say every time we talk about this topic, it feels very hard, because as much as I love hearing so many units are opening, and that is amazing. I think to your point, we know that we are missing so many folks, and that has real impact on our communities.
Yes, that's why the HO5 report is the way it is. So everyone laughs at me when I say the HO5 report, as if everybody knows what that is. It's the housing allocation that every city got in their housing element to plan for, show that you have capacity for this many units at this AMI level, and this one, and this one, and this one. It's why we need 44,000 units of just 0 to 30% AMI housing to meet current and projected need by 2044. We currently have 1,200 0 to 30% AMI units active in the entire county. That's all that we've produced to manage to keep the lights on for the last forever. It's really hard math to make work. So
I guess, yeah, I was gonna say, I will leave that hard truth as a continuing conversation and work for all of us. And when I say all of us, I don't just mean all of us sitting at this table, but all of us in the county and in our community. But I guess in terms of I think as you're talking about ways to figure out how to support that, do you guys do mixed income housing? And maybe could you just talk a little bit about that in terms of where you're maybe charging market rates in order to help subsidize some of the subsidized housing? And I mean, also, I think there's lots of studies that show the benefits of a product of publicly subsidized housing that was mixed income, and I think there's a lot of value in those sorts of developments.
it's something that, to a limited extent within program parameters, we do, and we recognize the value both mathematically and socially in that. This is where I get into the weeds that I'm not familiar with of program limitations, and this may be outdated, where if you had a market rate piece and you had a 50% AMI piece, and it was The 50% piece was funded by the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. This is what I recall. It may no longer be current, that the regulations are so strict that you would have to physically separate the low-income building from the market rate building, just because of how the program operates. And that, again, may not be accurate anymore, but that's been the truth for the longest time. Even so, the concept of income averaging or similar things do exist, and we do try to do those where possible. For example, the Leonard Crossing property, I believe, has a mix of AMIs, and as does 200th Street. Again, a handful at 50 and a handful at 30 AMI. So trying to do what we can where we can. But like you said, like we talked about, the need far outstrips resources. So,
I guess any outside of being mindful that the complexity that we put into place has real impact on, lots of things, including affordable housing. I guess any other, anything we haven't already talked about that we as elected officials at a municipal level should keep in mind?
I think what we want to think about is when all of us were coming of age in the 90s, in the early 2000s. I'm thinking of my students that I teach at Western right now. That's why I say, like they were born in the year 2002, which is horrifying. As we all came of age 20, 30, 40 years ago, whenever that was, housing was very different than it is now. And our expectations of what we could put on housing and what we could use housing to solve are very different than now. And all of those things that we add to housing to expect it to solve, in addition to just being a place to live and lay your head at night and wake up in the morning, that adds cost. Right now, that's not for a bad reason. An example is Senate Bill 6200 contemplates requiring cooling being allowed in units or being provided in all residential units. Right? It's not without reason, not without good cause, as the climate continues to warm. And there are very heart-wrenching stories that were shared in testimony of people dying from heat exposure because they couldn't get cool in their units that had no AC. But that has a cost, right? This is the conflict that's top of mind for me because I'm confronting my students with that right now is think about these things. They're both for good reasons, but we have to now prioritize them. When housing was kind of fixed in the 1990s or early 2000s, you could say, well, we're going to add cooling because the cost can absorb that. Now we have no ability to absorb any more in cost, in affordability, in certainly the Pacific Northwest, if not a broader consideration of the country. So as we think about that municipally, think about what you're doing and the cost implications. Lay affordability on the table next to other things that we do really hold sacred for good reason. But that's where we're at now, is making those hard decisions, because now the foundation of affordability and housing has been laid bare when it wasn't when we were all younger and forming our opinions about the way the world works. And so that's a new thing for us to consider, and it's hard. It's really hard. It's grueling, it's brutal, it's bitter, and it sucks, but that's where we're at. I'm here to try and provide support in those considerations, well-reasoned, data-based decision-making, rationales, justifications for action or inaction, whatever that may be, and support and partnership and more. So that's really what you can look to HASCO to do, is be that advocate. Something I'll just add really quickly is the state is considering a State Department of Housing, and something in a letter that I submitted to that task force is there is no advocate for affordable housing at the state level. Consider State Department of Transportation, State Department of Ecology, Healthcare Authority, Department of Health, similar. Those issue areas have advocates. Housing and housing affordability has no such advocate at the state level in state discourse. And think about who is going to be an advocate for affordable housing above things that you also hold sacred, personally and as a city. So, and that's hard. It's not easy. Sorry to monologue.
No, I really appreciated the perspective, Chris, and definitely always give us things to think about. So appreciate the time and the perspective.
My pleasure.
Others? Questions, comments, feedback? Seeing none and none online, we'll end with mine, and mine will be a comment and then a question. First is the comment, and I'm really saying this more to your colleagues, the ones who are going to be waiting to beat you up for misquoting them or whatever you said. I just want to be as clear as possible that it's amazing how your content, as you just said, use that last word, sucks. But
Guilty.
You, as the person, genuinely appreciate seeing you, hearing you talk us through this, walk us back from ledges in some cases. So just want to be as clear as possible that you are the perfect match for our county at minimum for doing this work. And I don't know how you do it and keep a smile on your face.
Thank you so much.
Let alone light in your heart, because it's got to be rough staring at this on a constant basis and just seeing it speed up in the wrong direction. Which leads me to my question. Mountlake Terrace. Thank you, Councilmember Matsumoto Wright, for showing how innovative Mountlake Terrace is, from literal public transportation to housing. But that said, as a council, and I'm looking back at your Appreciate Policy HO 1.5's direction, is Mountlake Terrace doing anything that you appreciate that falls under that category? Or is there something you can think of that we should be doing? You don't have to answer that tonight, because, again, ongoing conversation, but in the spirit of, I'm tired of it sucking, can we at least make it stop? Because, again, how is it under 4%? You said luxury, and I love the word association with Mountlake Terrace, luxury, but I'd also like to match reality. And so in that regard, it's like, what's going on, and what can we do, at minimum from a council perspective, to have some type of, at least from the gateway to the Snohomish County mentality, influence those above, up north here?
So to your question, I think I don't have an answer right now, except that I appreciate what HO 1.5 represents, which is direction to your city manager, your shiny new planning director, and the rest of the city staff. And I believe that it's embraced by everybody on the city council. And I think with those pieces lined up, as we do bump into something, hey, we'd like to buy this property, hey, we'd like to build this, but there's this little hang up, this rough spot, that we feel confident and comfortable certainly bringing that to your attention and problem solving whatever that may be. And that's what we really look forward to. So I don't have hey, could you change this one thing right now? I'm not here with that ask, but we feel confident and supported in having those discussions whenever they come up. And so that's what that really means to me and to HASCO, is looking forward to that being a positive conversation instead of sort of, oh God, brace yourself, hold on to your butts. This is going to be a really rough meeting. You're really going to have to spend a lot of political blood and treasure to try and get a change made. That's not the case with Mountlake Terrace, and that's what makes Mountlake Terrace and some of your other partner jurisdictions really special and stand out.
Outstanding, thank you. So I'll just speak for myself, which is to say I would welcome point blank, this is what's wrong, work on that. Last call for questions, comments, feedback. All righty, with that.
Something, if I can add with one quick comment, is to your observation. I stay positive in this because when I worked for Governor Inslee, you're reading the mail and getting calls from a state's worth of 7.5 million people that were in distress in one form or another, whether it's losing their house, losing their health care, unable to get medication, life-saving medication, homeless, and mental health crisis. I saw the worst of the worst in the outputs of inaction. And so what brings me joy is that as much as this presentation and my talks suck, and I admit that, this is opportunity, right? Taking action, taking any action is opportunity, and that's to bring light to this darkness. And so you really can't go wrong in this. And that's what brings me joy, is that it is hard, but everything that we do is something positive. That's really special.
Outstanding, and that's my second favorite poem I've heard tonight. That was beautiful. Okay, thank you, sir. Welcome back to the little bit of sunlight left, believe it or not. All right. We are going to now move to number 7, presentation of the year-end police department report with our awesome police department leadership.
It is cold. Good evening to all of you. For the people in the listening audience, my name is Pete Kahn, the police chief for the city of Mountlake Terrace. I have with me Commander King and Commander Haynes. They were in charge of separate sections of the police department. They'll talk about what's going on in their specific areas, and I'll just give you some general information to begin with. This report today will talk about trends in terms of crime and police activity in the city. There isn't anything dramatic to tell you about rises or falls. It's pretty consistent. There are some areas that show some spiked increases. There are some areas that remain the same throughout this year and last year. And as usual, we're having a little bit of a problem with audiovisual stuff. There you go. Super. Moving on to the first slide, I think that is our mission and vision statement. I'll keep that in front of you just in terms of context. You'll see a lot of repetitive data in our reports from time to time. One of my goals is to have each quarterly report or year-end report stand alone. So if that's the only one you read, it makes sense. So you'll see a lot of repetitive data that you've probably seen time and time again. This is our vision statement: serve, support, defend. Secondly, you can see that the picture on the right was only taken 4 years ago. This is what being a police chief does to you. Anyway, there's actually 4 decades between those two, and don't try to tell me that I haven't aged, because obviously I have, and we all have, but just have a little fun with it. That picture was taken in 1987 when I first started here, so my hair was different, and I had a lot more of it, actually. So, and we'll see some pictures of these guys. They can make their own comments on how well they've aged. One thing we have accomplished consistently since 2011 is to maintain our accreditation through WASPIC. There's only 30% of the departments in the state that do that. We're very proud of that fact. It's a lot of work. We'll be doing our reaccreditation, I believe, in 2027 through 28. Again, hundreds of standards we have to meet. We stay ahead of that with the help of our management analyst, Joey Worthen. Again, this is some of the repetitive stuff. This is one of the methods we use to attain our goals. Admiral Rickover, the nuclear navy, we're going back to the 50s and 60s now. He had 7 good points that I'm told he was more than eager to share with folks. And this is one of the expectations he held people accountable to in terms of reaching your goals. The next page deals with some of the goals philosophy from many years ago with President Obama in 2015. Again, we still believe strongly in all these goals philosophy and practice them every day. I won't do death by PowerPoint here, but I will tell you that we have goals that change from quarter to quarter, and some stay the same. We try to utilize department resources effectively. We are very innovative in how we approach the job. A good example of that is our unmanned aerial vehicle program, otherwise known as drones. We use them in a lot of scenes to both create time and distance, and also for intelligence gathering in terms of knowing what we're getting into before we do that. Traffic DUI enforcement, we participate in the Violent Offenders Task Force. We'll talk a little bit more about later on. We focus community-oriented policing and outreach. We have an embedded social worker program, which we just got back again in terms of costs. We really got priced out of the market for that, but through some collaborative negotiation with the folks, we were able to get this embedded social worker back on, and she works for us 1 or 2 days a week, which has been an extremely productive program. Very proud of that. We have a lot of outreach programs. Lately, we've been doing a lot of police outreach in terms of academy, self-defense. We had a class last week about theft, well attended, well taught by some of our senior folks. We have another program called Cops and Clergy, which many of you have attended. We'll continue to participate and interact with our faith-based community. We work collaboratively with regional law enforcement agencies, such as the Regional Intelligence Group, which is a fancy word for detectives up and down the I-5 corridor talking to us, sharing cases, methods, suspects. It might not surprise you to know that the bad guys don't always stay within one city or one area. So the more we know about what happens in Bellingham, the better we can have a reaction to it when that same problem rears its ugly head down here. We incorporate educational long-term solutions with enforcement. We work with other city departments to maintain a clean and inviting environment. One of the ways that organizations fail is just to become siloed, and one agency doesn't talk to another, or one section doesn't talk to another. For those of us that work in big environments, I need to know what the planning department is doing. They need to know what the police department's doing. I need to know what the fire department's doing. When we all have our separate little silos, that doesn't work very well, and we've maintained a strong effort to not devolve into that. We recruit and retain quality personnel. That seems like it's a never-ending saga. People move, they retire, they move on, they move laterally, and we're forever looking for the best and brightest people to replace them. I'm very particular about who I hire. So when I tell you that we're doing another background and that background failed, there's about a 50% fail rate in the police world, and there probably should be. There are people that are well-placed for this career, and there are people that are not, and we've all seen examples of both, unfortunately. I like to provide new challenges for personnel. I like to push them in areas they're not comfortable in. That you don't grow in the profession by doing what you're good at. You grow in the profession by doing what you're not really good at yet, but will become good at later. We maintain auditing systems to ensure policy compliance. Critical incidents, use of force pursuits that you'll see some examples of today are stats all over the top. Every use of force that's reportable in the city gets my signature. It's reviewed by the commanders and me. We look at body cameras, we look at reports, we field complaints, and we make a decision if it's within or without policy. Again, failing to do that has been the downfall of many people in the profession nationwide. We've all, again, seen examples of that in the past 6 years. We like to be regional leaders and set an example for modern policing. We listen to community feedback. You'll see some examples of that tonight. We modify policy and procedure promptly when we figure it needs a change. We focus on internal training programs. We want to foster a culture of partnership with the community. We're as transparent as we can be. We can't always be transparent all the time, but we try to do that when we can. We're proactive in incorporating improvements and efficiencies in lieu of the wait-and-see approach. And of course, we're fiscally responsible. That's a 365, 7-day-a-week task. Now we'll turn this over. Oh, I have one more slide here. I think we're all familiar with a study that was done by the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, and it comes as no surprise that Washington maintains an not enviable state of being the last in the country to maintain population to police ratio. If you look at the slide on the right, you'll see that in 2000, which was 26 years ago, we had 32 officers and had a population of 20,451 people. Fast forward 26 years later, we have a population of 25,198. It's a 25% increase, yet we have 4 less officers than we did then. The phrase that we do more with less, you really can't do more with less. You can only do less with less. If you're really lucky, you can do the same with less, but you can't do more with less. It's just not possible. It's a nice saying, we hear it in the press, but it's a physical impossibility. So it's something we need to be cognizant of when we're making decisions in terms of finances and staffing patterns. Just to call it to your attention, this is something that has been in the press much in the past month or so. Just wanted you to make sure you were aware of it. And now I will turn it over to the person on my right, who looks the same in both pictures.
That's me today on the left. Oh, yeah, sorry about that. That's me on the left, and then that's me on the right 26 years ago. The only comment I have about the difference there is I feel like I aged a lot better than the chief did, so. Anyway.
And you moved your hairline from your top of your head.
Yes, I did.
So, yeah.
Yes, I did. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick overview of the patrol division from 2025. Overall incidents continue to climb as our community grows, with about 2,700 more incidents in 2025 than 2024. Officers issued 1,094 notice of infractions, or approximately 1 for every 7 traffic stops. We continue to prioritize positive contacts and education as our goal for traffic enforcement. 2025 saw 782 arrests, which is consistent with last year's numbers. 242 citations were issued. The decrease is attributed to a shift from misdemeanor enforcement for driving while license suspended to non-criminal infractions. Total reports remain consistent with what we've seen during the previous 5 years. 2025 property crimes. Burglary remained steady at 70. Some good news is that vehicle prowls and vehicle thefts continued their downward trend. The reduction is attributed to area emphasis patrols, in addition to revision of pursuit legislation in mid-2024. Unfortunately, we continue to see an increase in the number of impaired drivers we're contacting. That said, these enforcement efforts are significantly contribute to the overall safety of our community. Violent crimes in 2025 saw a significant increase with about 30% year over year. As was the case from last year, the primary reason for the increase can be attributed to violent assaults, specifically domestic violence. Domestic violence continues to be a frequent call response for patrol. We did see a reduction in these crimes across the board compared to 2024. However, they continue to be above the trend line. These calls are a priority for patrol, from the initial response to the investigation process, and finally the support our domestic violence coordinator provides to the victims during the court process and getting their lives back on track. It's truly a team approach to hopefully ending the cycle of violence. Critical activity, specifically use of force. There were 24 total force incidents in 2025 compared to 27 in 2024. 37 of the 41 individual officer applications involve physical control, which is the lowest level of force that we can use. Officers continue to utilize a team approach when encountering combative individuals, which minimizes the risk of injury and generally provides officers the ability to limit the amount of force used. Patience and a team approach continue to be a focus for the defensive tactics instructor cadre. This chart represents the call types where officers used force last year. The most common subject profile for force encounters is a male between the ages of 25 to 35 and typically under the influence of intoxicants. As always, all use of force encounters undergo a thorough review process, as Chief Cobb mentioned, beginning with the shift supervisor, followed by the division commander, and finally the chief of police. Vehicle pursuits. The police department takes a very conservative approach to engaging in vehicle pursuits. Patrol initiated 3 pursuits last year. As with all force encounters, all vehicle pursuits also undergo an extensive review process throughout the chain of command. In the event an officer does initiate a pursuit, we want to make sure that they're well trained. Officers are provided extensive training in both policy and practical aspects of pursuits. As required by both law and policy, officers must be trained in at least one method of pursuit intervention. This is because our goal is to end the pursuit safely and as quickly as possible. The longer the pursuit is allowed to continue, the more likely it will have an unfavorable outcome. Our officers are equipped with and trained in 2 different intervention techniques. The first being tire deflation devices, the second being the pursuit intervention technique, or PIT. As I'm sure you've probably heard. The PIT is often the quickest and safest way to end a vehicle pursuit. In a moment, I'm going to show you a video obtained from a 2025 pursuit involving an impaired driver on Highway 99 and a Mountlake Terrace officer deploying the PIT. These are the details of the 3 pursuits during 2025. And here's the video, which I don't think we have the audio, unfortunately, but the video was captured from a Mountlake Terrace patrol vehicle mounted camera during the 2nd pursuit of the year. This is textbook execution of the PIT, which safely ended this pursuit with 0 injury and minimal property damage.
I want to see that again.
Complaints during 2025?
Actually, quick question. Yeah. Would you mind going back to I was curious about the disabled police car and more about if it was damaged and offline, who actually ends up having to pay for that? Is it do we just have to take that and fix the car ourselves, or does that actually get tacked on to say whoever the criminal? Yes, if I read that right, yeah.
There's a whole recovery process for DUIs, and it's a good question. We're going to look at that as part of the remedy, but in the case of DUIs, we can be reimbursed for the entire cost of that arrest, incarceration, the time the officer spent booking them, run the BAC, and any damage to the car can be part of the whole package. Our cars are set up with pit bars in the front, so other than just a little bit of cosmetic damage, there's probably none. And as far as the damage to his vehicle, that's kind of on him. But no, we don't end up paying for that. That's part of the recovery package.
I appreciate hearing that. Thank you.
Okay, 2025 complaints. We recognize community trust is both important and necessary for law enforcement to be successful in our work. As such, we welcome community feedback and have provided several avenues for members of our community to contact us. Every piece of feedback we receive is reviewed and considered for opportunity to improve. In 2025, we received a total of 12 complaints, 3 of which were generated internally, with the remaining 9 by members of our community. Of the 12 complaints, 4 of them were sustained. 0 complaints ultimately is our goal. However, 1 per approximately every 5,500 contacts that we have with the community isn't too bad. And it really speaks to the overall professionalism that the officers exhibit on a daily basis. Bias-based policing is something we're very much aware of and proactively work to ensure it doesn't occur in our agency. In addition to what you see outlined on the slide, there are a number of checks and balances in place to prevent it from occurring or to identify it quickly if it does. Some of these include extensive background checks that Chief Ka had talked about, critical activity reviews, and multiple options for community feedback. This is our demographics. And finally, this is the 2025 enforcement by race. With that, I'll turn it over to Commander King.
All right, so that's me, and that's a picture from about 20 years ago. I love working with these guys, but that was the best partner I ever had right there. So it was really fun to work with. All right, so technology overview. So our unmanned aerial systems program continues to grow and has become increasingly relevant in today's operations. The department began to transition to Axon mobile audio video systems in our fleet vehicles, just changing our technology in that, and it kind of mirrors up to what we do with our body cameras. It makes it really easy on a person that processes that stuff. Our less lethal impact weapons were updated. We upgraded our body-worn cameras from the 3rd generation cameras to the 4th generation, and we didn't have to pay extra for that. That's in our contract with Axon. The department upgraded several software platforms to one single platform to power DMS. The system includes scheduling, evaluations, field training, and daily shift training. And on top of that, we got a grant to cover that for the next 3 years. The department purchased new pepper balls, less lethal pepper ball launchers. The department continues to utilize Spider Tech platform. This system provides valuable feedback from the community and helps to focus on community priorities. The Spider Tech technology. Spider Tech enables law enforcement to automatically send one-to-one text messages and emails and mobile-friendly surveys to crime victims, reporting parties, and other members of the community. These messages are triggered by RMS and CAD data. Command staff reviews the responses from the community and addresses any issues. Commander Haynes and I spend every morning reading through ones that come through and address anything. And I added in some of the positive comments we get through there, and we had hundreds, and I just filtered through and picked out a few. So this is a snapshot of our organizational chart. The police department is a full-service organization budgeted for 28 commissioned officers. and complemented by non-commissioned staff. We currently have 26 commissioned officers, and we do have one person in background. And like Chief Koss said, we go through a lot of backgrounds and make sure we get the right people here. Staffing overview. The department maintains high standards for employment candidates and conduct extensive background investigations exceeding the state requirements. The department recognizes the importance of keeping staff well-trained and qualified. We maintain a robust training program to contribute to the development of our personnel. Staffing overview. We'll highlight a few of these. Officer Look and Officer Fee were selected to join the investigations division. We had a couple of people that they have a limited amount of time in there and they move back to the road, and then we bring in new detectives. Detective Wynn was selected as an acting supervisor. Officer Wigan and Russell were selected and certified as drone pilots. Officer Froisland has been working as the interim homeless liaison officer, and she works with our embedded social worker. Department training. As mentioned earlier, we continue to have a robust training program. Our officers are required to complete a minimum of 24 hours of training each year. This is mandated by the state. Our officers typically double the minimum. We put a high priority on our training. And we have several in-house instructors. We have instructors in defensive tactics, patrol tactics, crisis intervention, emergency driving, taser, impact munitions, bowler rep, and firearms. And some of our enhanced training, the police department provides generalized training through the use of webinars, training bulletins, and shift briefing, and through the Power DMS system I talked about earlier. So some of our 2025 training plan accomplishments, I'll mention a few of these. Detective Elrod attended basic homicide investigations, and he's one of our newer detectives. I attended the CERT program manager to establish our CERT team. All of our commissioned staff attended crisis intervention refresher, and Sergeant Mettler completed his FBI LEADA trilogy, which is a 3-part leadership series. And training plan accomplishments continued here. I will highlight a few more. Officers qualified in their yearly firearms training. Supervisors attended harassment, discrimination, and retaliation training. And detectives attended Internet Crimes Against Children, or ICAC, conference, and I'll talk more about that later. Our property technician, Tammy Custer, she processed 1,160 pieces of evidence and destroyed 2,080 pieces that were no longer needed. Our domestic violence coordinator, Danielle Singsung, there were 369 domestic violence calls for service, resulting in 191 criminal DV cases, and Danielle deals with all of those and helps out the victims. Danielle also assists detectives in obtaining medical records, contacting victims with case updates, scheduling forensic interviews, and many other tasks relating to victims of violent crimes. Jory Worthen is our police management analyst. Her primary duties include research and cost analysis of budgets and producing budget reports for the chief, accreditation management, and compliance auditing. She manages records with state retention schedules. She addresses claims, restitution requests, contracts, compiles annual reports and surveys. She coordinates purchasing for the department and maintains department webpage and public-facing documents. Our public records and animal control, our record staff continues to receive training from a variety of sources to include Washington State Law Enforcement Information and Records Association and the Washington Association of Public Records Officers. One of our record staff is a certified public records officer. The record staff processed 2,437 cases, 255 collisions, and 701 public disclosure requests. And in 2024, they processed 658 public disclosure requests, so those are just continuing to go up for us every year. Animal control processed 28 cases and 8 potentially dangerous dog hearings. Our community outreach. Officers continue to make community outreach a priority, and we had 1,762 community outreach contacts in 2025. Officers attended events like July 3rd, National Night Out, Tour de Terrace, and the tree lighting. In the picture in the upper right there, you can see Sergeant Porter, Detective Sergeant Sheets, Detective Wynn, Detective Fee, Animal Control Officer Rivera, and they provided a self-defense class for the community, which was a huge success. Officers continue to utilize the Brew Bridge program. In 2025, we had 21 interactions where we spent $1,249 on people in need, and we raised $1,110, and that program is run strictly by donations from the community. And Narcan was made available to the community through the PD. For cops and clergy, fourth quarter meeting was a partnership between the police department and the Lake Ballinger Center. Training was provided on situational awareness and financial fraud targeting our seniors. And our embedded social worker, like Chief Cobb mentioned, we were lucky enough to get the Scout program back, and we worked with them to get a price that was very, very reasonable. So our embedded social worker our program continues to be successful and is making an impact in our community. Our embedded social worker, Holly, is out 2 days a week and mainly works with Officer Freusland. And you can see some of her numbers from 2025 there. The detective unit is comprised of 1 detective sergeant and 3 detectives. They're primarily responsible for the investigation of major felony crimes and work closely with our domestic violence coordinator. 134 cases were assigned to our investigations unit, and this is a snapshot of the investigations they did in 2025. So as mentioned earlier, the detective unit attended ICAC training, Internet Crimes Against Children. This has assisted them in investigating ICAC crimes. ICAC was developed in 1998 and is a national network of 61 coordinated task forces representing over 5,400 federal, state, and local law enforcement dedicated to investigating and prosecuting in developing effective response to internet crimes against children. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in 2024 received 20.5 million reports of suspected child sexual exploitation. In 2024, reports contained 62.9 million images, videos, and other files related to the child sexual exploitation incident reported. In 2024, the state of Washington received 15,304 cyber tips referrals through the ICAC task force. Mountlake Terrace is an affiliated agency attached to Seattle PD as the lead ICAC task force agency. Mountlake Terrace investigates. The Mountlake Terrace Investigations Unit receives cyber tips assigned by Seattle ICAC detectives. Mountlake Terrace Police Department works these cyber tips as assigned in cases in order to determine if there is a probable cause for a crime. The Seattle ICAC Task Force receives online tips from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Typical crimes under investigation are regarding possession or dealing in depictions of minors engaged in sexual explicit conduct, also referred to as child sexual assault material, or CSAM. Mountlake Terrace takes the information from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and investigates whether a suspect can be identified through legal processes and whether the digital content can be made legally determined to be child sexual assault material. Once a specific crime and a specific suspect can be identified, Mountlake Terrace investigators work alongside other ICAC task force affiliates to serve warrants, conduct interviews, effect arrests, and other steps in the investigative process. These are far from victimless crimes. At the end of an investigation, CSAM material may be sent to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, where it can be compared to the database of known victims. This repository, known as the Child Victim Identification Program, ensures repeat victims can receive compensation from newly filed cases. Mountlake Terrace investigators regularly receive cyber tips from CSAM. Uploads occurring within the city of Mountlake Terrace. Investigators continue to train in ICAC investigations, and the unit continues to grow in technological capability and resources in order to investigate these crimes against children. Any questions?
All righty, questions, comments, feedback. I see Councilmember Doyle.
I have a comment that I mentioned to Chief Kaw earlier. I recently called 911 for help, and I really appreciated the professionalism of your officer. I wasn't sure if I should call, so I thought, and then I looped around again. I thought, I think this person needs help, and I really appreciated that he called me back within a few minutes. We were on the phone, and then I got the text from Spider Tech, which was great, and then there was a survey attached as well, which I appreciated. Basically, like rating like my happiness with the service, and then I think one of the questions was, what priorities do you have? What are your main priorities for safety here? And all the potential issues, and then there was a comment box. So I really appreciated it as a resident today, and as I told you, I really appreciated his enthusiasm. He was very cheerful at 4 p.m., and I was very appreciative that he was ready to go help this person. So. That's nice to hear. Yeah, thank you.
Others, feedback, comments, questions? Councilmember Sonmore.
Just a couple of things. I know we talked about it last time, but I'm going to bring it up again because I've ran into it a couple times, and people are putting it on Facebook quite a bit. I was over on 48th taking a walk, and I was in one of the cul-de-sacs, and a lady was backing out of her driveway, and there was 8 kids on the electric bikes, and she was backing up. She saw the first one, and she stopped, and then she started going back up, and there was 8 more, and they were just kind of zooming through the neighborhood. They weren't doing anything wrong, but I also saw 2 of them, and I swear they were like 13 years old, and they were in the inside lane going down the major hill on 212, and cars were just trying to stay away from them. And I've seen other ones on the little motorcycles. Has there been any, I don't want to call anybody out, but a lot of people on Facebook are blaming the parents. And, you know, sometimes if you're not home, the kids will go out, you know, so I'm not blaming anybody, but I'm just saying, is there anything people can do when they see the kids being erratic on the roads, on the e-bikes or on the little motorcycles? Is there any updates of anything that's happened?
I would encourage people to call the non-emergency number. An officer will respond, and we'll see if we can find the kids and talk to them, lecture them a little bit about safety and the expectations as far as how they're going to operate their scooter or their bike or whatever on the road, because it is dangerous. And the last thing any of us want to see is, you know, a kid or a driver get hurt or have to deal with that trauma, right? So that being said, I mean, we do have limited options as far as enforcement goes, but that being said, the people on Facebook are kind of right on target, because it really comes down to buy-in from parents. I mean, we'd be happy to take the kids home and have a conversation with the parents, but once we do that, we're kind of leaving it in their hands to address. So.
And thank you for bringing that up again, just in case anybody was wondering, because a lot of people are saying they're so close to getting seriously injured or killed. And having witnessed it just a couple weeks ago, and these young boys, it looked like they knew what they were doing, but they were so young, and I was just saying a lot of prayers going by them, just making sure that and I know you probably don't want to, I'd rather see them on the sidewalks if they're going to do something like that than in the middle of the road. And it's just, sometimes you're young and you make different choices that can last a lifetime, because we have a one-way road in Mountlake Terrace where a boy I went to high school with was driving his motorcycle on the wrong way, and he was hit by one of our friend's mother, and we repaginated the roads and made them one way throughout there, and it left a lifetime memory in my brain about how awful that was, and I just don't ever want to see that happen to anybody else. So I guess thank you for listening on that. My other thing is, I'm so disappointed about the trend with officers going down. People pay taxes and they expect us to have officers at a higher ratio, because we're looking at the light rail coming in, we're looking at different crimes that we've never seen before, the ones that you just talked about, online cybersecurity and poor children being exploited. And that's one of the things that kind of breaks my heart, is we went from 1.6 officers per 1,000 at 32 officers in 2000, and here it's 2026, and we're down to 28 officers, and I think you said maybe even almost 27 officers. I think one might have been out or something, but there's so much more coming into our city with more housing, more people coming in, different types of crime, light rail, and it's just something I hope we can change in the future. So that was my one other little rant. And the other rant is anything for World Cup. I just saw the mayor of Seattle saying that they have cameras around the stadium, but she wasn't going to turn them on until there was issues. And I was trying to understand what she meant by that. But are we going to do anything different or have more officers on during that time those games are going on?
Well, the quick answer to that is no, but we have met with other agencies up and down the I-5 corridor where we're working collaboratively. It's more in response to a potential problem or an emergency that occurs down there in terms of mutual aid. So there's been some discussions about that. That's going to be a lot of people coming into the city very quickly. So the answer is we're aware of it. We're doing some planning for it. But as far as staffing levels, there's no plan to increase staffing levels specifically for that at this point.
Well, the light rail, do you know if the light rail will have increased security? I'm assuming that you guys may be working with them at all during that time.
They were one of the people contributing to the conversations. They're aware of it. Again, I think most of the planning is addressed the potential for emergencies rather than just staffing patterns. I would hope and advocate that they increase their staffing and security, but again, that's not something I have control of.
And one thing to add back to the officers ratio, I was in Albertson talking to one of the employees. I was waiting on something, and we just struck up a conversation, and they said that, and it's nothing against anybody, and I'm not pointing fingers, but it was just a conversation that sometimes they don't even call the police anymore. There's so much theft going on. And I was so disappointed, too, that our state isn't looking into retail theft as much as it should be. We didn't bring any monies into that this year, but I was so surprised that they said that, because I've seen officers down there quite a bit, but she said, just it has increased so much throughout the years, and that's just a comment that I heard not too long ago. But the other two questions are really fast. What is a pepper ball blast? I know when I did the police academy and different training for different things, we didn't know about the pepper ball blast. Is that something new?
A pepper ball is a device that shoots a paintball filled with pepper dust. It's a less lethal option in terms of use of force. It gives us distance, it lets us maintain distance from a subject that's armed with a non-lethal weapon or someone that's just combative. It's not something we use in a lethal situation, someone armed with a firearm, but it just gives us options in terms of addressing the use of physical force and gives us more distance. So it's a separate device that fires a what looks like a paintball that is filled with pepper dust.
The launcher is we keep those in the car, right? And so the officers, every time they get out of the car, they don't grab the launcher, right? But the blast itself is a single shot that they carry on their uniform at all times. So they always have at least one available to them if a situation arises where they need it.
But they'd have to go back to their car to get
No,
the
it's-
launcher?
No, well, yeah, the launcher stays in the car unless, unless they know what they're going into and that they might need it, right? But if something happens that they were not expecting, right, there was no warning signs or anything like that, they have access to a single shot on their uniform, which perhaps would buy them some time to back up or, reassess and come up with a better plan.
Thank you. And then just one last one. Is 24 death investigations an average, or is that, I know when I look at the police reports, it's usually under a wellness check, and I know we haven't had any murders in the.
It's a pretty normal number.
Is that-
And none of those are nefarious. They're all just, somebody just happened to pass away in their home.
Yeah,
and
my
we
heart
go and
always goes out to
investigate.
those people and the families when I have to read it on the police report, and a lot of them I see are like wellness checks or something. And
Yeah.
we had that happen to a neighbor, so I was just kind of curious if that was an average or
Yeah,
not.
we have 0 homicides, which is great.
Yeah.
A death investigation would also include an overdose, so it isn't all just a welfare check sometimes. Some of those numbers contain fatal overdoses, of which we've had several in the past year.
If a medical examiner comes to the scene, we assign it for follow-up. Mhm. A detective will investigate it. If the medical examiner responds and collects the person, yeah, then it's assigned for investigation.
Excellent. Others? Councilmember Matsumoto-Wright.
Thank you. Going to light rail, whenever I take light rail, there's always security officers there. I think they're hired by Sound Transit, but at every station I see security officers, so maybe they're going to send more, but I don't know. I don't know if we have any problems at our light rail station, but I feel safe because first person I see is a security officer, then I go up and then I see another one. So.
They're pretty good about taking care of issues. They don't have to call us a lot. If they can't address it themselves, they'll call us.
Thank you.
Councilmember, you know who you are.
Yep, I know who I am.
All right, sorry.
So, although at this time of night, maybe not some nights. So thank you, Mayor, and thank you all of you for your work and for being here and for the work that your entire team does. Lots of positives, and I know we're here late. But yay for accreditation. I appreciate that. It's meaningful. I appreciate all of the work that goes into it. I don't think our community always understands that, but that's important, and I appreciate that really lays the foundation for all of the work you do. I think that and hiring the right folks, right? And a little biased as somebody who's spent my career in hiring, but I fundamentally believe as a leader that is your most important job, and it is why our community feels the way it does about our police department, is because you've ensured that you're putting the right people in the right roles. And so thank you for the diligence and the process. I think sometimes the right things take time, and I appreciate that continues to be the case because it matters, and I think we see it in terms of all of those positive responses there, as well as the stories that we share and the stories we hear in our community regularly about the fact that our community does feel like they trust our police force, they trust them, that they can call them when they have an issue, that you will be responsive. That matters, right? And so I just am very grateful for all of the work you do, and I think I've talked about a lot of them at other points in times, but particularly I'm grateful for the work around CERT, so thank you, Commander King, for that. Our community emergency response training, super important, so I appreciate your work in that space here. Appreciate the DUI focus and the increase in those arrests, because those are folks that are not driving dangerously on our streets, and that's really impactful. So lots of good work. But all sorts of notes, and I could probably continue talking, but just grateful for the holistic work that you do that makes our community more safe. And I guess one more, I really do appreciate the work that you've been doing around training lately. I so much positive community response around that in terms of helping people to be more safe, but also to feel more safe, which is something we've been talking a lot about this last year. And so grateful for the different ways that you're approaching that and that you've kind of tapped into, I think, different demographics within our community with those different trainings. So very excited about those and hope those continue. I did have a couple of questions. One was around, so there was the 3 pursuits and one was a collision, correct? Was there any injuries, I guess, associated with that collision?
He ran into a post, so just a little bit of damage.
Okay, great. I'm glad to hear that. And then the other one was just kind of around some of the increases in terms of the issues that you're seeing. I guess I'd be curious, so the domestic violence piece, I'm curious if you have any thoughts around like the cause of increase. I mean, I think we've gone through a rough period of time as a society. I think people are struggling, and I would imagine that plays a role. But I guess I'd be curious any insights you can give us into those increases in domestic violence numbers.
I wish Danielle was here because she would have all that info. But that being said, I mean, I think you can probably attribute some of that to at least the raw numbers to the population increase, right? Because, we are growing. Just in the last handful of years, I think we've added about 6,000 residents to our city. But with that, I think, you can see with the DUI numbers, right? Obviously, a lot of times when people, are under the influence, they start making bad decisions and they do dumb things. And quite frankly, I mean, a lot of the times that we go out to domestic situations, one or both people are under the influence. So I think that is a huge contributor to that problem.
No, I appreciate the insight very much. And then similar, I guess I was a little disheartened to see that I appreciate that we take sexual crimes seriously and are investigating them. And it's also disheartening to see that is, the highest number of investigations that we had this last year. And I guess, again, I'd be curious, any insights and any, ideas about how we could potentially reduce those numbers moving forward. Obviously, we want folks to come forward. We want those crimes to be investigated, and it would be better if those crimes had not happened.
I think real quick, the biggest step that investigations took last year was joining up with ICAC, right? I think that's a huge step forward as far as, getting ahead of that issue.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I guess, the only other comment, I appreciated the mention of, the number of police officers and recognize that, you all are doing, more with less, to your point. And I hope that our community here, so it's interesting because 2000, right, is the year before collectively as a state, we decided to limit municipalities' ability to raise taxes to keep up with the cost increases. And so we are now 25 years into that, and that has real impacts. And I think that's a conversation we're leading into here tonight. But I appreciate you showing us one of the examples of, that is a choice that collectively we have made, and there are real impacts when we underfund government. And so just appreciate that, appreciate the work that you do despite that, and appreciate the creativity and continuing to work to serve our community effectively. So thank you all.
Any other questions, comments, feedback? Seeing none, we will end with mine. Mine are mostly comments, and there is one question at the end. Firstly, I always want to start off with leadership matters and just thank the three of you again, the example you set, the standard you set, and also your candor. I think I applaud you all for putting into the public record before and after, if you will, photos. That's very brave of you. But I also think it humanizes you all, and it was also a good reminder of the topic you didn't actually say out loud today. Instead, you demonstrated it, succession planning, which is my way to double back to say congratulations, if I followed correctly, to officers look and fee on becoming detectives, or at least entering into the process. I don't know how it works, but being selected to be in the process to be a detective, or they are detectives. I don't know how that works, but
they are detectives now.
They are. Yeah. Perfect. Congratulations. I'd really mean that sincerely. And yet again, another example of the succession planning that you all have to think through. Just keep moving forward and to say thank you for that. I also parlay that into saying just wonderful work you all are doing. And I suspect you've been doing it, or maybe it really is an increase with the public engagement on the positive side, not on the, hey, we got to respond to something side. So I was going to make a joke, and I'll slightly make it still, which is the cops and clergy photo. For folks who don't know, that's my knee in the left, and may that be the only way I ever show up in one of these reports, doing something positive and not any other way. But nonetheless, I was there, and just to see the genuine leaning in of a community that is very vulnerable and doesn't necessarily know it all the time with the way the internet works and phone calls and scams. I mean, people are really investing probably billions into scamming people. It makes no sense. But nonetheless, that's just one example, the self-defense we've been talking about. I wanted to make sure we acknowledge your community academy work. I think to myself, each of the departments, how you're all doing this in the evening. And I know the police department is 24/7, but still, I imagine that was still a long day for folks, and we're hearing the feedback from our residents, and that's just another example of humanizing an entire process. I was really disappointed I couldn't make it, firstly, because it was on April 1st, and as a black man, that would have been awesome to say I'm in the police department on October 1st, or excuse me, on April 1st, which is April Fool's Day. Anybody not following that? But nonetheless, just heard great things. I actually had that other job I do had me out, so I just couldn't make it that day, but I did want to acknowledge that. We heard great things about that, and again, just thank you for putting that together. I would have loved to have seen the Space Needle was an example, right? Just seeing the power of the drones. But that said, and kind of keeping with the theme of Mountlake Terrace being awesome in our community and our police department definitely being there, I also wanted to make sure that although folks don't necessarily recognize it, and I did racialize myself here, I want to acknowledge Officer Russell. In the spirit of, I don't know how folks recognize how powerful it is to have had a brand new officer to our community be singled out in I'll pause and say, we're very fortunate to have the Snohomish County Black Heritage Committee that's in the process and in the business of documenting the Black experience here in Snohomish County. And last year they started some awards, and it went to the elders, if you will, who the awards are named after. So this year was the first year to be awarded or be recognized, if you will, and to have the opportunity to stand there with him. I was one of the folks as well, but to have one of my officers there was just amazing, especially when you think about the relationship historically between the black community and police officers. So to have that organization pause, and it was absolutely 100+ black men in that room, it was just amazing. And again, to have one of our officers represented, and I just know that's a reflection of the hiring process and everything that goes along with that. So just again, thank you all for that work that you do. And then the only question that I have, and again, I don't even know how to phrase it because I want to walk a little bit lightly here, but to Councilmember Sonmore's point, light rail is an example of something new, but I would argue these giant high-rises that we're creating are also relatively new, all things considered. And I don't know this is a fair question, but I will ask it. Does the policing change if there's a question, if there's a comment or, excuse me, a call, say on the top floor? I mean, you got to traverse the entire building to get to that, but I'm just thinking, is that a different element of policing that we haven't experienced before, or is that just a different location in which to do it? And I'm trying to acknowledge that you're getting density now, as opposed to, you know, you're out on the street or whatnot, but you're actually in a dense area, and it's just, I just think it could go any way. And I'm just going to pause and say I have visited places to deliver food and walked through and thought to myself, man, this felt like a movie where I'm getting set up. I'm going to walk in, and the group that was over here acting like they had nothing to do with it is just waiting for me to walk all the way in and do what I got to do, and now I'm kind of trapped. And so I'm thinking in those terms, but I hadn't thought of that as an officer, but now I am under this, in the spirit of, wow, there's a lot I hadn't thought about what goes into policing, and as we're bringing in these new designs, does that make your job harder? And again, I don't know what my actual question is, but feel free to try to answer it.
One of the things that an officer is expected to do is, in his or her environment, is to be familiar with the physical layout, logistics of the building. So it gives us a pause. We have to get out of the car, walk around, and become familiar with these areas. Plus, a lot of these areas are limited access, so you have to have a method to get in. And calling someone on the phone to let you in is not always probably the best answer. So there's another mechanism in almost every case. But getting familiar with your surroundings, walk the hallways, talk to people, and knowing how you can get in an emergency is something we have to consider in every one of these new buildings, particularly the taller ones. And that's something that's going to increase over time, not decrease. It's a point well taken.
So if I can use as an example, so that happened with tracks as an example. And again, I'm not trying to denigrate, just recognizing new density, new buildings, I imagine new approach. And so if I heard you correctly, you have to learn the environment, so that relationship is there from the
Yes.
spirit of no silos. That's
Yes.
wonderful to hear.
Absolutely.
Excellent. All right. Last call for questions, comments, or feedback. All right. Thank you, gentlemen, and appreciate everything you do. Okay, we are now going to keep moving forward, and now we're at review and vote on an ordinance adopting Lumen/Forge Fiber 37 franchise agreement with our Public Works Director, Gary Schmick. Gary Schmick, thank you, sir. And a guest. Oh, thank you for your patience with us.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Good to see you again today. Here with a colleague from Forge Fiber, Carly Nation. Thank you for joining us. This is a follow-up from last week, where we had a review and first look at the franchise agreement. So this is our second reading, and then for vote. And again, this franchise agreement and ordinance really authorizes Forge Fiber to conduct their day-to-day work, this kind of physical work, and maintain their system. There were some really good questions last week that I answered, and thankfully I think all answers were basically correct, but as I promised, I did talk to our attorney, Lisa Marshall, and I wanted to just kind of go over 3 questions we talked about, but just maybe a little more detailed and more legal answer. So the first question was, what happens if council does not approve the agreement? And what we've learned, or what I've learned, is local franchise authorities, such as cities, they're called LFAs, do not have the legal authority to refuse to enter into a franchise agreement with the provider, nor can a city refuse to negotiate with good faith. Having said that, this is not a rubber stamp, right? We've kind of negotiated this together and worked over this, so that is not what the law is saying. But what's the important part about the law is that the unfavorable terms, if there are any, that the authority or the city in this case has to have some jurisdiction over it if they have concerns, right? But the example is the city can't reject a franchise agreement because the city thinks the rates charged by the carrier are too high. And that's what Lisa and I really talked about, and that was one of the questions that came up. So again, just to recap, it's not a rubber stamp. We negotiated, we go back and forth. So definitely not a rubber stamp, but there are some things that just don't fall into this thing due to laws. The second was, may we negotiate improved service options and pricing for our customers as part of the franchise agreement? And again, that's no, but if the city receives customer service complaints during operations, the role of the city or staff would be to refer to complaints to the Washington Utility Committee, WTC, and to the carrier. So it's not, again, like we can't do anything, but that's just, again, not part of the agreement. But if our customers or ourselves are not receiving the service, we believe that there are absolute avenues to go down. So I wanted to make sure clear on that. And then the final one, I was asked, did we confirm that our franchise agreement language with Forge Fiber is equivalent to or better than the terms with neighboring communities? And Lisa reminded me that, yes, we have negotiated, that she has negotiated identical franchises between Forge Fiber and the city of North Bend, and that she is currently negotiating a Forge Fiber franchise with Aberdeen. And the franchises among those are pretty much identical from her perspective. So it feels that we really are, in this contract, in this ordinance, getting a fair agreement with what others have had. So with that, open it up for questions from the second week and for Carly or myself.
Councilmember Sonmore. Microphone.
It said under required reviews, so Hillary and the city manager didn't have to review this at all. We had a different attorney named Lisa Marshall who did the overall review for this?
Correct. Lisa and Hillary are colleagues. So Lisa specializes in franchise agreements, so that was purposely done.
Okay, because Hillary has to sign off on it. I looked at the contract. Okay, because maybe it should have just said attorney.
Councilmember Sonmore, that's why I'm here tonight. I have reviewed it with Lisa. She's my partner.
Yeah, I saw you were on the phone. Thank you. And then just under, there's still option 2 for us left on here, reject the franchise agreement and ordinance. So is that really even an option on there?
It's a great question, and I tried to answer it last week, and I probably didn't get it as clear. So it goes back to what we said in the first response here. There would have to be a reason that you all have that's under your jurisdiction, that would say that with these terms, or this term here that we, are reading unfavorable, this isn't going to work, so please go back to the table with your colleague and then come back with a new agreement. So yes, you could say no, but per the requirement state, there has to be a reasonable concern. And then we have to allow good faith to negotiate. So we have to then go back to the table in good faith. But yes, if there's a term, absolutely, that's just unfavorable in any city, right? Not just here, but in any cases, right? That is part of the law.
And I've never seen that before. That's why I asked all those questions
Those
last
great
time.
questions.
But the other question I just had was one other one. You're negotiating with North Bend and Aberdeen. Are you negotiating with anybody like Linwood or Shoreline? I would think you would have to be since you...
Yes, and I can say that the agreements there are also substantially similar to this one.
Can I just ask why you said North Bend and Aberdeen
That
since
was
they're so far away?
That was me. That's Lisa Marshall, our attorney I'm working with. She's currently working on those two right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And she has, I didn't talk with her, but her main job is actually with the attorney with Linwood. So she may have worked with you before. I'm not quite sure.
Might have been one of my colleagues, but
Yeah.
I'm doing one with Lake Forest Park and a couple other nearby jurisdictions as well.
Thank you.
Others, questions, comments, feedback? Seeing none, do we have a motion? We are voting tonight. Do we have a motion? You can go to Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me make sure I have it pulled up. Apologies. Mayor Pro Tem Wall always makes the motion.
This one's
really
really
good at
easy.
seconding it. Do you have it pulled up? Thank you. Oh, it's very simple. Okay, all right. I wanted to make sure there wasn't any complexity. I move to adopt the ordinance adopting Lumen Forge Fiber 37 franchise agreement.
We have a motion on the table. We have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Doyle. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor of adopting the ordinance, say aye.
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 Opposed? And abstain? Ordinance is adopted. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the questions last week. I actually learned quite a bit after that.
Excellent. All right, we are now going to proceed to review of the Fiscal Sustainability Task Force recommendations, and that's again with our city manager. While we're getting pulled up, we're going to take a 7.5-minute break. We'll be back at 9:10. Actually, it's almost 8, but I was talking.
Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome back. Thank you for that quick break. And we are at the review of Fiscal Sustainability Task Force recommendations with our city manager. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Yeah. I think if I can get this thing to go into full slide. There we go. Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Talk about tonight the fiscal sustainability proposals and the impacts that we've talked about most recently at your March 12th meeting. And this presentation is to share some of the revised budget packages and options based on your feedback from that March 12th meeting. So tonight we will review that previous meeting, look at details on 2 new strategy proposals, some additional details on travel and training, and schedule for sharing details on the fee increases in community development and recreation that we've talked about previously. Those just kind of a little bit of a preview. The next meeting for this topic is scheduled for April 23rd, and then we have it on your agenda for May 7th for a formal vote. So the phase 1 changes, all of the expenditures and revenues, as a reminder, are based on the 2025 numbers that we've provided you. They will be adjusted as economic conditions change. and this is a comparison of the preferred option that came out of the Fiscal Sustainability Task Force with the proposal that we have in front of you. So we've done a little bit better than what the Fiscal Sustainability Task Force recommended. I did want to remind you again, as we have the past couple of meetings, the internal cost allocation plan will be completed as part of the development for the 27-28 budget.
Please do. Councilmember Sonmore. Don't forget your microphone.
We do. It's toward the end.
I was just going to ask, how can you propose a budget based on an assumption that something will pass? And that will the Metropolitan Park District get our citizens anything more than they already have? Because the way I understand it is they would not be getting a pool. They would just be applying, we would be applying for a Metro Park District within Mountlake Terrace. We're not going to be joining with any other cities around us, so they would be paying for the service they already get right now, but they're not getting anything really that much more.
So we're not proposing a budget tonight. We're proposing strategies to address the gap.
I'm just wondering the strategy on that. So the strategy is you're looking at over $2 million to come in on a supposed levy that people would have to vote for.
Correct.
Right.
And we're going to show the impacts, the projected impacts of doing that or not doing that as part of the presentation.
And it looks kind of like those are a threat. And we had talked about the financial committee, and that's one of the things. They wanted to see no employees leave. And we've talked about that before, and this is the first time I've seen we've actually talked about employees leaving. So I was kind of surprised about that.
We did talk about that at the meeting on the 12th.
I wasn't here.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, this is the second time we've talked about that, but it's not, I hope it's not perceived as a threat in the community. It's reality. Similar to Chris Collier's presentation earlier, to borrow his phrase, it sucks, but it's the truth.
I think the truth is also looking at, we can't overspend what we don't have. And that's something that's been going on for at least the last 4 to 6 years. And so that's something that has me deeply concerned, because when we're looking at this, these are models that should stay in place, and they have to be revenue streams that are always there, like reduced software. We haven't even looked at all the different software subscriptions. Some are proposed, some are still looked at. And in the future, with AI coming on board, I think there's going to have to be more software subscriptions coming. So some of them are just strange to me, some of the proposals that I see. So I'll stop.
Okay. So the slide I already talked, well, I haven't. So the internal cost allocation plan, this was the FST preferred option goal. Second one was the proposal. As I mentioned, we've done a little bit better than the goal from the financial task force. So here are a couple of new proposals. They're a little bit different than what you've seen before, and I would ask you to keep in mind the effective year for each one of these proposals, because it's different, and that the bottom 3 on proposal 2 are different. In this presentation, previously we had assumed revenues, increase in revenues from permitting fees incorporated into one. This one we've separated them out, so you can see the difference there and how that would affect either one of the proposals. So the internal cost allocation plan, as I mentioned, we assumed a $50,000 reduction from that. But we don't need it necessarily for this proposal. We've already found an additional $50,000. We do expect to find the $50,000 during the development of the 27-28 budget. And a couple of examples, ensuring tighter controls on timesheets and things like that to ensure that public works crews are billing their time as close to the minute or the 15-minute increments as they can to the enterprise funds, water, sewer, storm, that kind of thing, was where we would realize those savings, among other things. So here's the software subscriptions that we talked about a little bit before, and you can see the savings there. We did $49 better than what the goal was from the FST. And a lot of that has to do with looking for new vendors. Many of you have seen the change from DocuSign to PandaDoc, which saved almost $6,000 and provides the same service. So those types of things, the change to from Granicus to Civic Plus for our meeting agendas, removing duplicative programs and removing the hotspots from our tablets or laptops and using the hotspots on the phones instead to connect to the internet. So the historical budget savings, these items we've gone through before. There's nothing new here that you haven't seen in previous meetings or throughout the task force. Ms. Dunmore.
There is one. Under recreation, it says miscellaneous, but how can it be miscellaneous if it's $37,689? Wouldn't you have to know what miscellaneous is to come up with that amount?
Which are you on?
Under number 3 on historical budgetary savings, it says recreation 2026 miscellaneous. It's been completed already this year in the last couple of months.
Yeah, I was just about to mention, so some examples of that are property management for over budgeting for historical. We've over budgeted for repairs, for things that we don't expect to fail. The river pump would be a great example of that, where we didn't have, weren't going to replace, had no plans to replace that, but it failed, so we had to pay for it. What this will eventually mean, assuming this is adopted, is every time we have a repair that's over a certain dollar amount, I think it's 5,000 is the small assets, we would need to come to council for approval. So it just lengthens the time between a failure of a component and being able to pay for a repair and get it on order and all those other things that come along with it. So you can see here, again, this is, a few things have changed. Professional services, for instance, in streets, that's for things like traffic control when we're repairing a section of street, or catch basin that has failed and is going to cause a liability issue. The public utility services, again, we over budgeted for utilities, for electric and water and all those kind of things. That money recycles, of course. It goes into the enterprise funds. So the reduction in general fund expenses. So the original goal was $1 million over 2 years, and with the historical budget savings, the original goal was 150. We found about 750. So that reduced the $1 million goal to slightly less than 500,000. And how we get to that number would be a reduction in 2 FTEs and service cuts you can see on the slide here. So professional services for things like council retreats and executive leadership team retreats, travel out of state would be reduced significantly. Memberships in professional organizations, economic development, professional services, that would be our partnership with our Chamber of Commerce. And then we have Parks and Police service cuts. One of those would be a currently vacant position. As you heard earlier, in the police presentation, we have 28 commissioned officer positions. At the moment, we have 26 and a half police officer positions. So they're filled. That would result in the detective or the officer, I'm sorry, that's currently assigned to the Regional Violent Offender Task Force to be brought back to perform regular duties here in the city. So, bank capacity, and we've talked about this a little bit before. Bank capacity is essentially what we are legally allowed to collect, but that we choose not to, and it's banked for future use. We can use that for just about anything in the general fund for any good governmental purpose, and that is money. There was some discussion during the financial task force about why don't we leave that bank capacity as a savings account. It doesn't really function that way because you don't, the best way to have it in a savings account is having it in your reserves, because then you can earn interest on those dollars and, things like that. And it's available for immediate use with council approval if we need it, if an emergency happens to arise. So we have 2.465 million in bank capacity currently. The original was 2.4. Again, these numbers change as assessed values change, and the tax assessor determines that. So you can see the history here, and we shared this several times with the financial task force so they understand, because it's a difficult concept for people to understand. But we shared this with the task force and with council. So when the city annexed into the fire district back in March or early April of 2023, we refunded to the voters, the property owners, the difference between what the regional fire authority would take in their tax and reduced those dollars on our levy. And you can see the increases for insurance rates, 92% increase, over $1 million. We had the market adjustment for non-represented employees, public defense costs, bargaining units, and infrastructure costs increase. So that's where you see the lines crisscrossing there. So the impact to taxpayers for the average value home, slightly less than $600,000 in the city, would be $142 in 2027. Again, back to that, paying attention to the effective dates of each one of these measures. Would be $142 in 2027 and another $142 in 2028 if it's phased over 2 years, which is the current proposal. So an additional $284. Again, rough numbers because assessed values change, but that's where we are at the moment. That would allow us to maintain most services at our current levels, but to Councilmember Sonmore's point, not increase them. And then want to talk a little bit about the internal impacts first, if we don't, because it really informs the middle section there. So not taking the bank capacity would result in 16 layoffs of 16 staff. Many of those services are necessary, so we'd have to do those, perform those services even with the reduced staff load. And there would be attrition, as was discussed last time. You're asking people to do more with less. To Chief Caw's point earlier, you don't do more with less, you do less with less. And we're adding all the work onto the remaining employees. What that would result in, lower response times for most services, less public communication. There would be potential for reduced open hours at City Hall. Public records response time would be greatly reduced. We would likely discontinue the passport program, and permit review and business license review times would increase, which would be an impact on our economic development priorities. Parks and streetscapes would be less well maintained. We talked a little bit about parks not being watered as often, basically doing the minimum to comply with grant obligations, for which we use to purchase most of our parkland. And streets would see a big impact as well, with less ability to patch potholes and take care of problems on our roads. So the next one is the transportation benefit, sales tax. The goal for that was $835,000, and I think it's important to remember the first 0.1% of the increase is a council decision. The next 0.2 would be a decision by the voters. And council indicated at our last meeting that they're interested in evaluating options where there is only one ballot initiative in the next few years instead of going back several times. So we prepared a different option for a future levy lift if that's something that council wants to consider. You'll notice if we go back to the two different proposals, one includes this 835 increase and one does not. The next piece here for the license fee, and this is the car tabs. Currently, owners of vehicles in Mountlake Terrace pay $20 annually when they register their car as a car tab fee comes to the city. That results in $315,000 per year in revenue for our street fund. If that fee was doubled from 20 to 40, it would result in an additional $315,000 in revenue, assuming that the number of cars registered in Mountlake Terrace stay the same. As you know, the federal government, the state, and our city have put a tremendous amount of resources behind light rail and other public transit options, which is intended to reduce the number of vehicles over time. So factor that in when you're talking about the difference in the car tab totals there. Proposal 1, we would implement in 2027, and in Proposal 2, we would delay implementation until 2033. And that's made possible by those 3 separate revenues that I pointed out on Proposal 2 for increased permit fees, increased recreation fees, and then picnic shelter rentals and plaza rentals and things like that. Here's where we talk about the Metropolitan Parks District. So the Financial Task Force recommended a city-only MPD to maintain our current recreation and park services. There is a regular subsidy from the general fund of slightly more than $700,000. So the cost of providing, or the cost that we charge our patrons for our services does not cover the cost of providing those programs. So again, council is evaluating options where there is only one ballot initiative. So if, assuming we move forward in that direction, this is something that council will need to consider as part of that ballot initiative, whether it's an MPD or a levy lift. So here's the impact for that. Again, for the average home, slightly less than $600,000. It would be approximately $242 per year, or $40 a month by 2030. This maintains the full operations of the rec pavilion, all the child care programs across the district, parks and events. And one thing I would also point out, the recreation pavilion, as we've talked about many times here in this room, is in a difficult position. It's 66 years old, I believe. Along with a lot of the component parts of that. So the impact of not implementing, well, the internal impacts again, it would essentially close all those programs in the recreation pavilion with 42.9 FTEs, total full-time equivalents, but that's 123 people working. A lot of part-time folks teaching classes, things like that.
Councilmember Sonmar.
So can I ask then, this is where I feel this is the threat coming in. So you're saying, okay, citizens, if you don't pass the metropolitan, we're getting rid of all of our, would have to be 43. I don't know where you get the 0.1 from, but 43 of our full-time employees, because we haven't thought of any other way to keep those people there. So that's your impact that you're making, is if they don't pass that, then they don't get any parks. And there's nowhere else in the budget to fund them from.
I don't know where it would be, where we could find an additional $2.15 million. And it's not just an MPD, it could also be a levy lift. We're providing options to council. Could also be a levy lift.
Councilmember Sonmar.
Could also be a levy lift. 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 Could also be a Okay, so essentially the impacts, closing the pavilion, there would not be any city events. There would be the inability to restaff the streets or parks areas, and it would reduce the appeal of the city to development and to current residents. Levy lid lift, as I mentioned, there's two different proposals here. One which would be implemented in 2029, depending on how council views that. That would be approximately $266 a year. This is different than the bank capacity discussion, so the numbers are going to be a little bit different. So this would be implemented in 2029, and then you can see all of the bullet points there, including the sales tax, the potential MPD, and reinstating some of those positions that we had to remove a few slides earlier. In Proposal 2, the levy would be implemented in 2028, and it would, again, Proposal 2 has the additional revenues from the permit fee increases, the recreation, and the facilities rentals. And it would allow us to reinstate the lost police staff, not just commissioned, also non-commissioned. So you can see those impacts there. So implementing, we would be able to maintain the current levels of service, again, in 2026. And not doing so, and again, this is either MPD or not added on. These are two different options. And the impacts would be the same as the MPD. So increasing fees for the fleet partnership. We've talked about this and before. This is the renegotiation that Shoreline is expecting for our services to their fleet vehicles. When we negotiated the current contract in 2024, we told them we would come back in a couple of years and renegotiate the contract. So the one impact to that is we currently spend about $500 a year servicing Shoreline's fleet needs. If we increase, which we understand Shoreline wants to do, increase the number of hours that we spend on their vehicles, then our internal services would go down unless we added an additional mechanic to staff. Again, increased fees for park rentals, so picnic shelters, picnic tables, renting out the plaza. This would generate approximately $30,000 a year in revenue. If we don't implement that, we would need to find $30,000 somewhere else we would need to cut. This will create, with the rentals, more maintenance work orders to make sure that the rented spaces are clean, because if people are going to pay a fee, the level of expectation will go up. And then an increase in fees for recreation. Excuse me. This may deter some people. However, the goal is to be competitive with other agencies, and it helps to maintain levels of service. If we don't implement, we would need to find an additional $100,000 where we would be able to cut. And the impacts, it improves the cost recovery. So right now, I believe the goal is 81%. So this would increase that number to close to 100, not quite, but close. The increase in fees for development services. We would increase fees for most permit types. However, it helps that many of our neighbors in the last 18 months or so have pretty significantly increased their permitting fees. So even, we're evaluating those numbers now. Again, we'll share those with you on April 23rd. But even with an increase, we think it's likely that we'll be toward the bottom of the permitting fees across all the types. If we don't implement, we would need to identify an additional $200,000 in the current budget that we would be able to cut. This also implementing this would improve cost recovery for community development and supports the general fund, and workload remains consistent. Transferring of some REIT, that's the real estate excise tax, from the streets capital improvement program to operations. State law allows us to do that for $100,000 or 35% of the available REIT revenues, whichever is greater. Our total, 35% of our total is somewhere, I believe the last time I looked, it was 266,000. So 175 is below the maximum. So it would replace the general fund subsidies that are in street operations. And if we don't implement that, we would need to identify $175,000 elsewhere in the budget that we could cut. And then you can see the internal impacts there on the far right of that slide. It is considered a one-time funding, but like I said, state law does allow us to use up to 35%. It would also reduce funding for maintenance. So here's some of your alternative budget strategies. Alternative one, going back to those two different proposals, you have the software subscriptions, the historical budget savings, the reduction in general fund expenditures, the property tax lid lift, and then the property tax banked capacity, shoreline fleet revenue, and the increase in the car tabs. And you can see the average cost to house, to home, over there on the right for those revenue generating pieces. And here you see the impact on our fund balance and reserves. So you see the bottom line there is the minimum reserve policy we currently have at 5%, the orange line. And then the green line a little bit further up is the best practices, which we are trying to get to, of 25% of the previous year's operating expenses. So that would put us in a position where we get back to best practices of 20% and maintain that. You do see over there on the right that in the out years, 2034 and 35, it dips below. That's because of the recession that's built into the model that Baker Tilly built for us. So here is alternative two. You have all mostly the same things, but then toward the bottom again, you will see the recreation fees, the new park rental fees, and the new development fees that had been proposed, along with the transfer of REIT to the general fund from the streets capital improvement program. And here is the impacts on our general fund from alternative two. Again, same general result, slightly different, but it gets us back to achieving those best practices for our reserve funds. So implementation next steps. Again, April 23rd, you'll have more details on the development fee increases and the rec fee increases. We do have those public meetings scheduled. May 7th is the day that we plan to have this to council to vote. We're also doing the public outreach in April and May throughout the city. And here's the decisions and timeline. As I mentioned, we need to have a decision. We're starting to develop the 27-28 budget now. Next week is when those meetings start. So we need to have an idea of what are acceptable ways to move forward before we start that budget development in earnest with departments and with the council. We would also like to share that with public when we do the public engagement pieces. So we recommend that City Council consider and then look forward to April 23rd when you'll get that additional information.
Questions, comments, feedback? Councilmember Sonmore.
I have a few things to say, so I'll just say them very slowly. So by 2028, if we do the bank capacity at an average, which is a low ball, if you go out, really our home people would argue that our home prices are actually more than what we put out there. It could be up to 770, 650, average of 653 to 770, but then average, right? 2023, which it says times 12 is $283 a year for just the bank capacity, which people aren't getting anything more for. We told them that we wouldn't use that when we did our RFA. Now the RFA is going up, but that bank capacity is something that we didn't want to use because Linwood used it, and we were kind of appalled at that they were charging their residents for something they were getting nothing for. Card tabs, that's another $20 a month, and you think there's not going to be any complaints about the $20? There will be. Sales tax, I don't know, just $25 a month, that's $300 a month. Average of Metro Parks is $40 a month, that would be $480 a month. So just with those couple of things, that's $1,083.92. And we're not even talking about the general property tax already. So I'm just putting numbers out there because we have to look at total cost of what it means to our citizens. We never talked about how council is going to pay their part on also reducing dinner cost or travel. Last week, we talked about Shoreline going to Denmark, and that's why I said I don't think we should do that because of our budget right now. In years past, we've always had the council also toe the line on reducing budget for what they do as well. Metropolitan Parks, we have not, as far as I know, being educated last time when we went through this, we have not been really educated on what metropolitan parks mean and how it would be put out on the ballot, because when you put something out on the ballot, it costs money too. Years ago, it used to be $30,000. I don't know what it's up to now, but I guess overall, I noticed in one of the presentations you gave us in early January that council's ultimately responsible for the budget, and I disagree with a lot of that, but if we do have the ultimate say over the budget, I would not vote for any of this right now. I think you should go back and look at other costs that should have been cut and look at other ways to reduce, because when we were in the committee, we weren't even told. We started talking about how we wanted to do cuts, and then it just came back with a list, and that's all we were given. And we didn't go into details like we have here. I think they would have been very interested to see that, but I think we can do better than what I'm seeing here.
Others, comments, questions, feedback? Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate the continued conversation and bringing back some feedback based on our conversation last time. Council absolutely is responsible for the budget, and I appreciate staff doing everything that they can and the Fiscal Sustainability Task Force doing all that they did to try to give us options for our consideration and decision making. And it is absolutely hard decision making. There is not easy decisions before us. But again, I think that's why we have been having this conversation for so long. That's why we've had as much engagement with our community as we have. That's why I know we've got additional plans for engaging with our community, and why we have so many dates set aside to have this conversation. So I appreciate it. Every time I think I get a little bit more clear on where I am at on things. And so, I mean, a couple of thoughts based on what I'm hearing tonight to try to, I know you're asking for, we're trying to do a lot of things and moving a lot of pieces at the same time. And so I guess as you start having conversations as a leadership team in preparation for planning budget proposals for next year, I will say personally for me, what was helpful is just kind of going through like there's a lot of things on the list, and there's a lot of things that aren't, that in an ideal world we wouldn't have to do, right? But again, we're 25 years into underfunding municipal government, and we've been cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting, and there's only so much left to cut, right? At some point, if we want to maintain, we won't even talk about potentially growing city services, because I know that there is also lots of need, as we heard about tonight. We are not a city that offers any sort of human services. I mean, but anyway, I'll put aside all of that in terms of kind of the need, but just to maintain the really kind of basic services that we do offer, and that we offer really well for what it's worth. I think we do a great job given the size of a city we are, and I think staff has done a good job of navigating how to continue to provide those services in a way that supports our community despite some of the budgetary challenges over the years. But so I guess where I started was which options for me are the least appealing, and that seemed like an easier way than starting at the top, given that we are going to have to implement a lot of those new proposals in order to balance the budget without making severe cuts, which at least for me, that isn't doing nothing and looking at what that means for our community, is not an option for me, at least. Would be absolutely unacceptable and would have dire consequences on both our ability to meet our obligations as well as to continue to serve our residents the way that we have. So for me, that would be off the table. I am not doing something is not an option. So I think in terms of things that are least appealing to me in terms of the proposals on the table, sales tax, I think I talked a little bit about this last time. For me, that still is a non-starter. I'm not super interested in adding another super regressive tax to the table. I'm also not, and recognize that there are challenges with all of these proposals in terms of impact, and that is real. And I think that's one of the most impactful that I would like to avoid. It also takes off potentially needing to go out to our voters twice, which again, for me is a priority. I don't want to have to ask voters twice to vote on two separate tax measures. So that for me would be bottom of the list. I would prefer not to transfer some of our REIT funds from streets, CIP to operations, just because I think there's a reason that those funds are there and would like to ideally keep them there. I would prefer not to go the Metropolitan Parks District at this time, given a number of things, but I think particularly that we're having regional conversations about how to support some things kind of connected to parks, and I think the complexity of setting up a parks district now and potentially having to shift directions at some point in the future, for me doesn't seem like the best of the two solutions. I appreciated staff hearing the feedback at our last conversation and bringing forward a proposal around a recreation and parks transportation and safety levy that I would be very supportive of continuing to explore and understand. And then kind of with that working backwards, basically everything else would have to stay on the list. And so that said, if everything else stayed on the list, at least by my math, which don't trust, but definitely verify, I think there's some cuts that I would prefer not to see made based on the current budget. Particularly, I would not like to see our economic development partnership funding cut. I think that's really important at this point in time. We're looking at ways to increase revenue that isn't coming from our residents, and economic development is an important part of that strategy, so I would prefer to stay away from things that potentially negatively impact that. I would like to see us add back the parks and police service cuts, so that, again, we're continuing to offer those important services. I think training, particularly staff-wide training, if we can find a way to, I think with those numbers, that there's budget to support that. It's a fairly low number, and I think the reward or the return on investment of training is significant. And I guess I would also love to see a way that we make sure we continue to prioritize that. So I guess I'll leave it there, but those are my general thoughts on where I think we're heading a good direction in terms of trying to better understand what our options are and kind of the impact of different decisions. And so I appreciate that. That's kind of where at least I'm at based on our conversations thus far, and appreciate the continued information. So thank you.
I also want to mention that Mayor Pro Tem Wall has has put together a separate spreadsheet for all of you to take a look at. I do have it tonight in paper form. If you'd like to take it, I will also make sure it's included in your email so you have it electronically as well.
Councilman Sonmar.
Can I ask then, and this is not getting at you, but I'm just trying to understand. So you did not want the metropolitan parks, the sales tax, the training, or increase in development fees?
So yeah, so we have the list of new proposals has 14 items on it. I went from like, which was the least appealing to me, and removed them until we got to a place where we were no longer able to break even. And so for me, that was sales tax, the transfer from REIT from streets to CIP to operations, the Metropolitan Parks District. And actually, I think based on the conversation tonight, I guess I would add, maybe I don't. Well, no, I think I'll just leave it there. Those were the items that I would not. I would prefer my preferred path forward would not include those proposals.
Would you mind just
Does that
saying?
answer the question?
I got
Sorry.
item 6, item 14.
Oh, okay. You want yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, just be easier.
Sure. Yeah, number 14 on the list. So transfer some REIT from street CIP to operations. Number 6, sales tax. And number 8, Metropolitan Parks District.
Thank you.
And then you said something about training.
I said I would, so I was going to say, as part of the kind of more detailed information, there's a number of proposed pieces of that. And so if we remove, I was going to say, based on those numbers, we would have some funds to potentially shift some of those cuts around. And training, from my perspective, is typically money well spent in terms of return on investment. And so ideally, again, I think where we can invest our city dollars in ways that proactively prevent future costs, I'm all about.
Thank you. And so I'm done with that conversation. So this is just my words coming out of my mouth now, is just why I need to play hardball with this budget, because I don't want our council to be the worst budget that's the city has seen, and what's going to happen in the next few years. My issue is we did about housing tonight. We had a presentation on housing, and we're always talking about affordable housing and how we're going to do. Washington State is not making affordable housing out there. Right now, what the state is doing is they're overspending. They're not keeping within their range of money, and we're looking at more taxes coming to us because there's a lot more things that our state wants to fund. So there's going to be increase from the state, and now there's an increase from the city, and we were talking about seniors paying 30% of their housing cost. It's going to go way up than that, because now they're looking at costs from the city. And my issue is, if you don't have the money, you don't have the money. So how am I going to get money out of a citizen that doesn't have the money? And I don't want to force somebody out of their home. So mine is always, what can we reduce? Because all I see is, we need more, we need more, we need more. Well, what are we doing with less? Because our citizens aren't getting a lot more for their money. They're just having to pay more. So I was expecting to see more cuts, instead of saying, well, if you don't do this, we're going to cut this. And we talked about this last year too, is that we were going to have to make staffing cuts. And if we weren't going to do anything last year immediately to stop the budget crunch, it would come to this. And I can pull out the email that I sent last year that I never got a response on. And a lot of this, I guess I just don't understand. If we don't do the metropolitan parks, do we have to come up with that $2 million? It's just never enough. And it's time that we have to look and make cuts that are not going to be appealing, but we have to do our due diligence, because our citizens expect us to do the right thing with their money. And if they keep on seeing costs go up, what are they going to do? Are they going to get another job? I mean, they're going to have to move. They're going to have to sell their house to go into an apartment just to break even. That's where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a place of passion for our citizens and understanding how much more can they afford. And I keep on saying, oh, let's do this and let's do that. Not going to a retreat for $20,000, and it comes down to, sending extra people to a conference. that should be an automatic that we shouldn't be doing. It's just something, I think we need to look at this budget more, and I'm just not comfortable with it. And Aaron's right, we do have the ultimate responsibility for voting on the budget, and right now, I can't do that.
Mayor, we're right at 10 o'clock, so, yeah.
So, yeah, please, go say, need a motion to address that. We're at 10 o'clock.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that we extend our meeting by until 10:30.
You have a second?
Second.
We have a second on the table. Any discussion? Nope. Vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We will move to at least 10:30. We'll reconvene if we have to. Councilmember Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry to interrupt. Thoughts about the Metropolitan Park District. Personally, I would like us to have a more regional approach. So it seems like a short-term solution, sort of what you were alluding to. Yes, it would solve the problem now. But I want a more regional approach for the city, and I think it would be hard to go from city to regional. I feel like that seems like an awkward transition. At the same time, I feel that a lot of residents would do almost anything to keep the rec pavilion open. I don't know enough to know whether this is the best option to do that. I agree with regards to the sales tax. That is a big no for me. I'm not in support of increasing our sales tax. And then item 12, increasing fees for recreation. I had asked a couple of meetings ago, it was having to do with childcare costs at the pavilion. But just to reiterate, I would love fees for recreation to be somewhat tiered if possible. I think that people who can pay more should pay more, and people who need to pay less should pay less. I don't know if other cities have tiered fees for recreation programs aside from childcare, but I think it's a more equitable option for residents.
So there is tiered approach for recreation fees, also for things like water and sewer, not here, but in other places. But it's based on, not on income, it's based on whether you're a resident or a non-resident.
Right, yes. I was thinking more in terms of income, not resident, non-resident.
Comments, feedback, questions? Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the conversation, and, would echo Councilmember Sonmore. I think we all care deeply about our residents and impact to residents, and that's why this is such an important topic. And it's one of the reasons, I guess, that I didn't say, but I guess is important to name, because I recognize not everyone is sitting in these conversations and reading all of these things. So one of the reasons that, from my perspective, I'm more supportive of a levy, one reason I'm more supportive of, sorry, you can tell it's late and I'm losing steam quickly. But so one of the reasons sales tax for me is a more impactful choice for us to stay away from than perhaps the levy is because there are options for our residents who there is a senior tax exemption for property tax for seniors and for folks with disabilities and veterans. And so there's some options for folks who do have limited income to be less impacted by that decision than the sales tax, which is universally applied across all of our residents and tends to be applied more heavily in terms of total income for folks who are lower income earners. And so I think that's an important thing to note if folks haven't taken a look at whether or not they are eligible for some of those exemptions. I would encourage you to do that. I think there is an upcoming, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I'm sure we can make sure that city staff shares it out. I think there's an upcoming session related to making sure that folks understand what those qualifications are and what the process looks like to go through it. And so I'm fully supportive of us trying to make sure that we're doing everything we can to limit the impact of some of these increases on those who can least afford to pay it. And I think echoing what Councilmember Doyle said, there are folks in our community who can afford to pay the true cost of services. And I do think it's important that we're charging the true cost of services to those who can, because it does then help us to find solutions for those who perhaps can't, and maybe looking at options for tiered recreation program cost or more scholarships than we're offering currently, or more opportunities to to support, low-income folks with their utility. I think that we should absolutely be looking at those sorts of programs to help mitigate some of the impact to our residents, but we can only do that if there's any money in the budget to actually do that, which means charging those that can pay, and there are plenty of those who not only can pay, but want to pay and want more city services, not just to maintain, but want more city services. And so I think recognizing we have a broad range of folks, I do think that these solutions are better options than perhaps some of the others.
Councilmember Sonmore.
I just wanted to talk about the sale or the seniors tax exemption. So I helped a senior. I downloaded the paperwork and tried to get the exemption for them. And I believe they own their house, but they were making $27,000 a year on Social Security, and they didn't qualify, and they had nothing. And Kyoko may know a little bit more about it than I do, but I was just kind of shocked. And so I'm glad we're having this conversation. In childcare, I get all that, but we're looking at $4 million. So we kind of have to look at the big ticket items and the little ticket items that all add up. And I think we're just kind of storming and norming our thoughts on different things, but it's going to get pretty dicey on what we have to do. And it's not going to be a fun place to be in. And I know you're smiling.
They just upped the senior exemption income qualification, and it's quite high. If I remember correctly, it's like it's over 70,000 now.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it right now. It's for threshold one, it's 68,000 to 79,000, 391,000.
And some states are actually looking at not charging seniors any taxes, which would be lovely. But what happens, though, is our city doesn't get that tax, right? So it might go okay for the senior, and I'm hoping more people apply because I feel very sorry for seniors who are getting priced out of their homes. But it also means less taxes coming in for the city.
They still pay taxes. It's not zero, but it's very, very reduced, and it may be less money coming into the city, but it's also people, because they're going to be shopping locally, they do contribute in other ways too, and they do use utilities and so forth. So it kind of, in my opinion, balances things out, and they can stay in their home instead of going away to another facility. And if we allowed them to rent their rooms out easier, it might help too.
Good point. Any other questions, comments, feedback? All right, then we'll end with mine. In the spirit of time, and we're not done with this conversation, I just wanted to go back and level set on one comment that I don't want misconstrued, so you can tell me point blank. We just looked at 32 slides, lots of proposals, lots of numbers, everything's on there. Nonetheless, out of the 32 slides, none of this is about growth. This is, if you like everything that we have right now, we're calling that zero. If you'd like to see that in 2-3 years, that's what these 32 slides are. And let me use as an example that we're not in a vacuum. I don't know if anybody knows, but we're very fortunate to be even having this conversation today. As a Gen Xer, Monday was absolutely unbelievable to me. So I'm not going to have this conversation in a vacuum. And I do recognize the point of that is costs are going to keep on rising and skyrocketing in ways we can't even envision. And that's called living on the earth, unfortunately. So I just want to be clear. Nothing in here is about growth. It is about zero, staying at zero. The next question is, do you want to go negative, or do you want to be at zero so whatever happens you can think about going positive. But the only alternative is negative. There is not a single positive growth in this slide deck, in this Fiscal Sustainability Task Force, which just want to acknowledge you all. You put in great work. And to think that we're just going to throw your recommendations out potentially, we're not going to do that. We are not, we're just talking right now. But in case any of you are at home and that's you tuned out, know that we're just talking here and recognizing the complexities of this. But your work was not done in vain. But again, I do not want to leave this room thinking that the fiscal sustainability, ergo sustain, was anything about growth. It was about maintaining what we have at a minimum, or we would go into the negative, but not a single positive half point up. It's either zero or negative. I just want to be clear that that is what we're talking about here, what every city is talking about here. I can't think of a single city in the state of Washington that is talking about growth. They're talking about maintaining, this is what my community expects of us. Can we continue to do that? Forget about the growth. We'll get to that in the city manager's conversation, because I just want to acknowledge, well, this will be an interesting conversation to have next. It feels like mom and dad paying bills and you want to ask, can you go to the movies? Which this is not going to the movies. So I'll wait till we get to that with the city manager's conversation if we choose to do that tonight. But I didn't want to cloud the water here. This 32 slide deck is nothing but zero or negative. That is what's on the table. No growth here. Please, any feedback, questions, or comments? Otherwise, we keep it moving. All right, with that, we will close that and move to the city manager's report.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Just two things to note tonight. Our next scheduled meeting on April 16th is canceled, so we won't be meeting here tonight. We won't have a quorum available. And the next item was the offer by the city of Shoreline to join them on their trip to Denmark, to Copenhagen. Provided information last week to all of you about what that study trip entailed, and happy to listen to the discussion.
Feedback, questions, comments about the Denmark, if we're interested, or any other thing else. I presume that will be on the table today. Councilmember Sonmore.
We know the city of Shoreline is going. We could always talk to them when they came back. I've known other people that have gone overseas, and it's nice to know. But right now, you just saw our budget, and we're needing to save everything we can. And I think that no cost like that is beneficial to our city at this time.
Anyone else? Councilmember Matsumoto Wright.
Yes, I agree with Councilwoman Sonmore. At any different time, when our budget looks a little different, it probably is a fantastic opportunity to take. But in what we're looking at right now, it's not, I don't know if it's feasible or not with our budget, and it won't look good, I think, to our public when we're telling them that we're going to be raising your taxes and then go off to Denmark.
Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to say, it looks like a fantastic trip. I have relatives in Denmark, and they are very happy, and I would love nothing more than for us to bring all sorts of things, not just kind of urban planning from their country and cities back here to us in Mountlake Terrace. That said, I guess I would echo what's already been said in terms of, like, we have tons of budget challenges in front of us. We have a lot of things that we are proposing to cut that are hard cuts to make, in addition to the raising of taxes and revenue. And I think as we're prioritizing, it unfortunately wouldn't make the cut for me at this point in time.
Any other comments, feedback, or questions? All right. We're missing two of our colleagues, so we don't know what they would say. We've heard from 3. I will just chime in. I'm a little too close to this. Instead, I will back up and say in my other life, I am working on budgets, and a colleague said something to me that I was like, oh, I appreciate that, which is don't cut your budget so much that you can't do your job. It doesn't necessarily apply here, but the principle of it is just do your job. This opportunity, we heard other cities have gone, so I guess we could talk to them as well. Shoreline is adjacent to us, literally shares a road with us, and they invited us, and that's interesting. I do recognize the timing is bad, but I would just say it seemed like we're missing the fact that, well, it's going to be real ironic if in a year, 2 or 3, we decide we want to take the lead on our own and think about all the staff hours that they pointed out were going or that were put into this. So I'm just looking at it as this is literally the cheapest you're probably going to get as an opportunity to do something like this. I don't know enough about it to plead my case. Full transparency, I presume everyone's aware they invited the mayor and potentially one other person. So that's why I'm saying I'm too close, but I would just remind us how ironic this is going to be if we find ourselves asking our staff to apply for this opportunity down the road because every city around us is doing this and we're just in the dark. Because the good news, as I pointed out about being the newspaper boy, I can throw that information on the side of your house or at your stool or at your stoop, right? In the sense of you will be at whatever it is they think they want you to know as opposed to you were there to hear it for yourself. It isn't just a trip to Denmark. It was a bunch of workshops on the front end and on the back end, but nonetheless, I am comfortable with we are broke is what I hear us saying. This doesn't look good. Definitely the optic is questionable, but at the end of the day, we need to be able to do our jobs, and this seemed like this was bringing all of what we want Mountlake Terrace to be as an opportunity to go see the experts who have done the very thing that we have done or want to do, which is be a destination city. But I can respect the concerns that you had. Don't think they didn't cross my mind, but I also can hear my colleague in my ear saying, yeah, but this is not the time to cower. Don't cut yourself to where you can't do your own job, if you will. So again, not exactly a 1-for-1, but would have been horrible if I didn't say what was on my heart. So that said, any other questions, comments, feedback to the city manager about anything? This was a city manager report. All right, seeing none, we are closing in on the roundabout here to council comments. Do we have any council, oh, excuse me. We just heard that the review of the April 16th agenda is not going to happen because the meeting was canceled. That said, we parlay to any council comments. Seeing none, I have one. I was going to wait, but we're not going to see each other for a while, so I actually just wanted to quickly go back since there's a couple minutes here. Back in November or December, it was a brief discussion about the Certificate of Municipal Leadership, the CML, which for our new council mates may have no idea what that means. You can look it up, but for some others, we have been doing it. It actually came as a question of maybe the mayorship, whoever is in that role, should have finished their Certificate of Municipal Leadership. That is a long way around the horn to say I don't usually pay attention to those things. I just live my life. But the latest one came out, and I was looking at it, and it had a, hey, track your progress. And I only learned that I have 41 credits already, and basically I'm 3 recorded webinars away from completing my municipal leadership. That 11 additional credits will then go to the advanced, which is just to say they know on a 30, which means I need another 19. And then it's a community service, which if you don't know I'm community service, know that that's who I am. So I just want you to know your current mayor will close his Certificate of Municipal Leadership over this weekend, and then very soon here, go ahead and finish the advanced as well. So I appreciated that conversation back then. I encourage others to look into it because, again, you're probably already doing it and just don't know. But there is a tracker that will let you know. And just know that your current mayor has 41 credits. And just so you know, the 3 that were missing, one was budget, the irony that we're talking budget. The other one was land use, which we talk land use all the time. And the other one was something as well, which I can't remember, which is something that we do every day. So it's not that we're not demonstrating these skill sets, but it's good to engage with your larger elected community. So on that note, unless there's other comments, we are adjourned.